Well, hey everyone, good evening. It is election day, and we are here to kind of follow the polls and see what's going on. And we are loading up. I'm loading up a website right now, so we're going to be live streaming this, and we're just going to see how it goes. And we may go on for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Who knows? Middle of the night. We don't know. So if you're watching this, welcome. And I'm just waiting for this to pop up. And if you're coming on, welcome. If this is your first time here, if you're here watching this, aha. So here's what's going to happen, guys. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And let's do this. Here we go. And I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay and can hear the live stream coming through. If you can't, let me know. Give me a thumbs down in the chat so I know that you can't hear either myself or the live stream that's coming through. So the goal here, guys, is to basically kind of comment on things if I feel I have something to say, or if you guys have questions or comments or anything that you want to add to the discussion, then this is kind of why we're here. This is an important, actually a historical election, and probably the biggest turnout. I can't say for sure, but probably one of, if not the biggest turnout in U.S. history when it comes to voting. So let's get back to it. Oh, wow. So right now it looks like Donald Trump is winning Indiana right now. Wow, he crushed Kentucky. So New York and California have one of the biggest electoral. So right now what they're saying is Donald Trump has basically have the electoral votes for Indiana and for Kentucky, and Kamala Harris has for Vermont.
places that Republicans and Democrats have been pouring a lot of money into, hoping that they can flip one or the other. I think that the House races could really tell us a lot.
Well, let's go back to Greta Bronner. Greta, what do you have for us?
Yeah, Peter, we'll talk about some of those Senate races. A couple have already been called, but first I want to share with you AP VoteCast data. This is sort of like an exit poll, but they talk to voters who ahead of voting because of the way people vote today. Many people, millions of people voting before Election Day. So they call it their VoteCast survey, and this is what they found, that the economy ranked as a top issue but concerns over democracy are what drove many voters to the polls tonight. So that'll be interesting to flesh out as we go along here tonight. Democracy and the economy, which one of those concerns or both of them is what drives people to the polls? So on some Senate races, the Associated Press has called the Senate race in Indiana for Congressman Jim Banks. He ran for this seat when Mike Braun vacated it to run for governor. And Jim Banks, with just 14% of the votes in, has been declared the victor by the Associated Press. Speaking of that governor's race, Mike Braun is strongly favored to win this, and the Associated Press put the check next to his name tonight with 15% of the vote in. He decided not to seek another term in the Senate and instead run for this governor's seat. Moving on to Vermont, Bernie Sanders running for a fourth term in the state of Vermont, and 0% of the votes in for but the Associated Press feels comfortable calling this for Senator Bernie Sanders. All this data, again, can be found on our website, cspan.org/results.
As we mentioned earlier, your voices are the most important tonight, and we want to hear from you throughout the next 17 hours. We're going to put the numbers up.
We're not going to be on 17 hours,
if you're
guys.
Supporting Kamala Harris for president, 202-748-8920 is a number for you to dial. If you support former President Trump, 202-748-8921. And if you don't support either of them, try this number, 202-748-8922. Plus, one more line to give you. This is our text number. This is for text messages only. 202-748-8903
This is interesting.
is that number. If you do send a text, and we'll try to get to as many of those
And we're going to be keeping
can,
track, folks,
please
also.
include your first name and your city. Also want to let you know that on our companion network, C-SPAN 2, we have Spectrum News. It's their national newscast, and that will be playing on C-SPAN 2. Spectrum News is part of Charter. Well, there are 34 Senate races in 33 seats. 2 are in Nebraska. And here to talk about some of the ones we want to watch this evening is Kirk Beto. He is the editor-in-chief of the Hotline. Mr. Beto, let's start with the race.
So we're going to be keeping track also as well of the main races, of course. And you know, your feedback is going to be also important. I'm curious to know kind of who you think, who you feel is going to win, depending on what state you are, where you're from. So chances are this is going to be going on for days, figuring out who's going to win. You know, they're probably not going to know tonight because of all the turnout and all the compiling and everything they're doing. But you know what? You never know. But you've got to look at it this way: whoever wins, it's going to be contested by the other. You may be thinking why I chose C-SPAN. I decided to go with C-SPAN because I felt they were a little more neutral. I don't want this live stream to go one way to the left or to the right. I want it to keep it as impartial as possible, even though that's impossible. So I just want to kind of let you guys all in on what's going on. So I hope you guys are having a good evening, and let's get back to the coverage.
Race in Pennsylvania. What do you think about that one?
Thanks all for having me tonight. Pennsylvania is one of those top-ranked, the battleground races that we're watching right now. Of those 34 races that you mentioned, Democrats are on defense in 23 of them, including 3 states that former President Trump won twice. Pennsylvania is one of those tipping point states. It's one of the ones where Biden won it, flipped it from Trump, who won it in 2016. It's an incredibly tight race right now between Senator Bob Casey, who's a scion of a political dynasty in Pennsylvania, and Dave McCormick, who folks might remember from 2 years ago ran in the Republican primary but lost to Dr. Oz. He's one of the kind of typical candidates that Republicans have recruited this cycle. A wealthy businessman who's able to self-fund a lot of the campaign. It's the second most expensive Senate race this cycle, and Dave McCormick cleared the primary pretty early, and because of his massive wealth as a hedge fund manager, he's been able to put Bob Casey on general election footing since over a year ago now. It's going to be an incredibly tight race, and we're seeing right now that however Pennsylvania goes at the presidential level is probably how it's going to go at the Senate level right now.
We have a non-incumbent race up in Michigan.
Yes, that's an open seat race right now, and it's one of those 5 races in the presidential battlegrounds that also have Senate race as well. Rep. Alyssa Slotkin, who is from the Lansing area, one of the most well-funded House members. She's no stranger to tough races, wants to make the jump to the Senate after Debbie Stabenow is retiring. She's facing former Rep. Mike Rogers. Again, another wealthy businessman. He went into the private sector after his time in Congress ended, and that's another close race here. Now, in the Hotline's power rankings of the 10 races most likely to flip that myself and our Senate correspondent Nicholas Anastasio wrote, that Michigan was right at the tail end of some of our the presidential battlegrounds. Number 4 was Pennsylvania, then Wisconsin, then Michigan. We are seeing a little bit more daylight between Slotkin and Rogers in the polling that we're seeing, and that's reflected at the top of the ticket too. It's one of the seats that Harris is performing better than Trump at. So we're probably seeing however the presidential race goes, that's how the Senate race is going to go in Michigan as well as Pennsylvania.
What about Wisconsin?
Now, Wisconsin is a really interesting race here where it's a very localized race. Again, Eric Hovde, a wealthy businessman, a banker who ran for the Senate there about a decade or so ago, is facing Senator Tammy Baldwin. Now, it's a big lift for Republicans right now. That was one of the races that was getting away for them a little bit in the summer. We saw that Tammy Baldwin was outspending and out fundraising Hovde on the airwaves. But in the closing weeks, as the presidential race has gotten incredibly close, the Senate race has gotten incredibly close. I know there's a common theme here in those presidential battlegrounds, but it's so rare for split ticket candidates to succeed. In fact, about only 3% of all senators represent a state that went the opposite way of how it went at the presidential level. So whoever wins the top of the ticket is that party is probably going to end up winning the Senate race there as well.
Is Texas really in play for a Senate seat for the Democrats?
Oh, Texas has been Democrats' white whale for years. I mean, they're really trying to evoke Beto O'Rourke's run in 2018 here. Now, Colin Allred, who's a representative from a former battleground district, he's the Democrat running there, former NFL player. He has outraised Ted Cruz actually every month this year. Ted Cruz has had to rely very heavily on his super PAC to come in and support him. Colin Allred is blanketing the airwaves. Again, because Texas is so big, so many expensive media markets, it's an incredibly expensive race for both candidates right now. In fact, over $2 billion has been spent on Senate races alone, not just in Texas, but across the entire battlefild. Now,
$2 billion, wow.
How competitive this race is, it's just going to be really, really tough for Colin Allred. Ted Cruz has done what he needs to do, at least this last year, to moderate his image a little bit, put a little distance between himself and former President Trump. It's going to be incredibly difficult for Colin Allred to overrun the top of the ticket. We're projecting that Trump will carry Texas by about maybe 3, 4, 5 points. If it's anything less than that, then Colin Allred has a chance. But it's probably Democrats' best pickup opportunity. Like we said, they're on defense in 23 seats. Republicans are on defense in 11. It's Democrats' best pickup opportunity, but that's not saying much right now when it's such an uphill climb.
And we will be back with Kirk Beto, editor-in-chief of the Hotline, in just a minute. Let's hear from Greta Brawner first.
Peter, we want to show you some early results in some states where the polls have closed. Now, throughout the evening, there may be mirages that happen in some of these states. Could be a red mirage or a blue mirage. We don't know until the total vote is in, and the Associated Press won't call these races until not the total vote is in, but they won't call these races until they feel comfortable that who's ever trailing cannot catch the leader. And then at that point, they would put a check mark. We'll start with Virginia. Just show you again some early results here. The former president is leading 58.7 to 40.6. Right now, there's 0% of the vote in, 13 electors at stake. Now, here's where there could be a red mirage. The Washington Post reporting that in 2020, the former president led Joe Biden in this state for 5 hours after polls closed on election night before heavily Democratic area of Fairfax County reported almost 400,000 vote update. Biden won Virginia that year by a margin of 10 percentage points. Moving on to the state of Georgia, the Peach State. 16 electoral votes are at stake here. This is where it stands right now with just 3% of the vote in. The former president is leading 51.6 to 48%. Now, again, this is just early on. And the NBC reports that most counties will report their early in-person and mail ballots first in the state of Georgia, causing a blue mirage before the statewide results move toward Trump as Election Day votes are reported. After that, there may be a small shift back towards Democrats as the late arriving mail ballots are reported from large metro Atlanta counties. So beware as we talk about these early states with hardly any of the vote percentage in, and their competitive states, that you may see a mirage happening. We will keep you updated throughout the evening, and you yourself can do that. Get on your computer, have your laptop as you're watching here on C-SPAN, and go to cspan.org/results.
Evan McMorris Santoro of Notice. Greta talked about the 0% in Virginia, yet former President Trump is leading. Fairfax County, when I first moved out here, was the Republican firewall, and now it's the Democratic firewall.
That's right. This is the hardest part of the night, right? Because these things are just coming in. Everybody wants to know the answer, but we're going to have to wait for a long time. And as you're talking about, those suburban areas, that is where the Harris campaign has put a lot of effort. There are counties, we're talking about Georgia. There are counties in Georgia, that we're looking at. If you see Harris doing well in Union County in Georgia, you're going to be. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. That's my own notes. Excuse me. We're talking about in Georgia. We're talking about Baldwin County in Georgia. That's a county where we would look and see if Trump did very well there, that you would see maybe he was flipping some of those voters that he was looking for. But it's so early, we just don't know any of this stuff yet. And so this focus that you're talking about this idea of where the vote has changed, where the campaigns have put their resources, and how the candidates are appealing to different states, it's very important, but we just don't know yet what to say about it.
Let's hear from DJ in Dayton, Arizona, a Trump supporter. DJ, when did you vote, and how was the process for you?
Well, it was a little bit chaotic. I voted yesterday.
Was it crowded?
Yeah. It's just getting worse.
What do you mean getting worse?
Well, I think in the last couple days it may be, for whoever it is to decide it, it's going to get chaotic maybe.
Why did you support President Trump in this election?
Mostly for the inflation prices and his views on abortion.
DJ, is Dayton, Arizona, is that in Maricopa County?
No, it's in Yuma County.
Yuma County. Thank you, sir, for calling in. We appreciate it. Evan McMorris Santoro, Maricopa County in Arizona is about 70% of the vote.
So they're having calling
That's right.
in.
I mean, this is
Interesting.
a hugely important area for Democrats that they need to do very well in Maricopa County. They spend a lot of time, a lot of money there, a lot of effort there. It's a place where we really could see some of this shift that we've been talking about all night. It's also interesting what the caller mentioned about the idea of waiting a long time to vote, being online. This is another story of this election that is emerging so far, is people are having to wait a long time to cast their ballot.
Well, let's look at some of those Western Senate races. Kirk Beto, hotline. Let's go to Nevada.
Nevada is one that has come online really quickly in the closing weeks here. It looked like throughout the summer and early fall that the Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen had put this race away. Despite how close the race was getting at the presidential level, Sam Brown, the Republican there, was trailing pretty significantly behind Rosen. Unlike some of these other Senate candidates that we've been talking about on the Republican side, he doesn't have a source of independent wealth, at least at the same level as a Dave McCormick, Jared Hovde, or any of those other folks do.
This is going to be interesting, guys.
Jackie Rosen outraged.
So again, 270 electoral votes.
Jackie Rosen bought a huge ad buy, about $14 million worth, the day after the Republican primary.
So, real quick, basically what happens is you have the Electoral College, which is a lot of people say is sort of outdated and unnecessary, and you should go with the popular vote versus the electoral vote. Well, from at least my understanding anyway, the Electoral College, basically they do it, I believe, by population. So the more, I guess, the more land you have, the more population you have in your state, you're allocated votes. So basically they're charged with, they represent the population, right? The popular vote, okay? So the majority. So, and if you win, if the majority of the popular votes go to a certain way, then, say for example, you're Democrat and the majority of your state votes Democrat, then you will get those electoral votes, whatever they are, 3, 5, 6, whatever they end up being. Each state is different. It's not all states are the same. Smaller states like Vermont have 3, Hawaii I think has 3, Alaska I believe has 4. Then you start getting up to California, and now you're getting I think 10, 11, maybe more. I'm not sure exactly the amounts, and that's how they do it. So a lot of people have been calling for not doing the Electoral College, just doing it by the popular vote and just doing it like that. So basically you need 200, like I said, 270 electoral votes to win. So you could say, for example, win the majority of the states. However, if they all have smaller electoral votes, 2, 3, 4, what have you, but your opponent wins maybe not as many of the states, but gets more electoral votes than he or she, whatever party they're on, will basically win. So it's the popular vote basically would be everyone, just the majority. However many people throughout the United States, they compile whoever has the most. It's pretty simple, right? And I think there's some sort of mathematical equation to determine each state's electoral votes and how many they get. And a lot of people have been like, well, wait a minute, if I have, let's say, a bigger state, or I have whatever demographics, I only have 2 or 3 votes, as opposed to, having it even or what have you. So there's been a lot of people in the past have basically said, the Electoral College isn't necessarily the best representation for elections, either on a state, local, federal level, what have you. And then you have those who want more of the popular vote, the majority rule is kind of a thing, right? So that's just a little bit of an idea of what the Electoral College is. And I believe it was back in the 1800s it was created. Again, my history, my social studies teachers probably would be killing me right now when it came to doing this type of subjects. But anyway, just to give you a little bit of an idea, in case you're not familiar, in case you're new, trying to figure it all out, that hopefully will give you a little bit of a clarification. Let's get back to it.
Primary. I was able to get on air early and define Sam Brown as shifting his policy on abortion, as someone who had come from out of state. He had run in Texas before. But now in the closing weeks, Republicans have been really encouraged by a surge in early voting by GOP voters in Nevada. In fact, they've come in pretty heavily. The Senate Leadership PAC invested some money in there. You saw Steve Daines, who's the chairman of the NRSC, the Senate Republicans campaign arm, go down there and campaign with Sam Brown. They're pretty bullish based on the early voting numbers here, but we'll have to wait for a few days for Nevada to sort out all it's counting because 80% of their election is done through the mail, and they're allowed to turn in ballots a few days after today. So we'll have to sit tight here on Nevada.
Kirk, is Arizona truly in play for the Republicans in the Senate?
You know, Arizona has been one of Republicans' biggest hurdles this cycle. You know, again, going back to the top rankings of the Senate races that we thought were most likely to flip, Arizona is at the dead last of all the ones that we see as those presidential battlegrounds here. Kari Lake has a persistent problem with Republicans, frankly. People remember her run for governor 2 years ago, where she insulted John McCain, the late senator, insulted his supporters as well, ran a very conservative campaign, actually praised a little some of the Civil War era abortion law in Arizona that was briefly on the books while she was running for governor. She's tried to moderate her position, but at the same time, as you saw throughout the last 2 years, she hasn't given up her false claim about election conspiracy theories in the gubernatorial and the presidential race in Arizona. Ruben Gallego has been successful in kind of evolving from his more progressive roots as first a city councilman, then as a member of Congress from the Phoenix area, and really moderated his image with voters, really run to the right of President Biden on the board, or even the right of Kamala Harris as well. And Kari Lake just really struggles to consolidate Republicans behind her. I bet there's going to be a lot of voters tonight who vote for former President Trump, but just leave the Senate race blank, and that's a huge problem for Lake.
So that's a state where we could see different results on the presidential level and the Senate level.
That is one of the few instances here where we could see some legitimate split ticket voting here. Not just because there's a lot of Trump Gallego voters, there's certainly going to be those, but more that Republicans are going to vote for Trump but not vote for Kari Lake. And it's kind of the story of all these folks who on the Republican side kind of imitate Trump or try to do Trump light. They're just never as successful as the real McCoy.
Give us an update quickly on Montana.
Montana is the ballgame for Senate Republicans. With West Virginia off the board with Senator Joe Manchin retiring, we're basically at a 50-50 Senate right now. Democrats will have to defend every single one of their seats and win the presidency if they want to keep their Senate majority. Montana is tough. Former President Trump carried that state by 16 points 4 years ago. John Tester, who's been doing his best to run as his own person, his own brand. He's a dirt farmer from Montana. He looks the part even. He's running against Republican Tim Sheehy. But there's a limit to how much gravity you can defy when just the partisan headwinds are so heavy right now.
We will be back with Kirk Beto throughout the evening. We're going to look at the House of Representatives shortly, but it is 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and more polls have closed. They've closed in North Carolina, which also has a gubernatorial race and a tight House race, Ohio, which also has a Senate race, and West Virginia, where they're electing a senator and a governor. Greta Bronner, what do you have for us?
We'll come back to those poll closings in a minute once we see some data populating there by the Associated Press. But Evan referenced this earlier, that it could be a very long night. We have a competitive presidential race. We have some competitive Senate races. Take a look at Charlie Mathiasen, with Politico, who tweeted this out earlier and reminded all of us that here's when the Associated Press called the presidential election in years past. It was the Saturday following the election in 2020 when the presidential contest was called. It was the Wednesday after the election that the race was called in 2016. And you can see the previous cycles and the times for the previous 3 cycles before that. At the beginning of our night, Peter, you talked about the money being spent in these federal elections this time around. $16 billion total. From Open Secrets, they put this together. Outside spending, those are the outside groups, on 2024 federal elections has hit a record of $4.5 billion, with more than half of
All right, guys, so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and let this run throughout the evening, and I'm going to be here, but I'm going to be off camera if you pop on, you type in, you say anything great, or if I have comments or if you have comments, go ahead and put them in. I will answer you. I am here. I'm just not going to be sitting on camera through the entire time, but I will let this run for however long. And yeah, let's see what happens. Let's go.
That spending coming from groups that do not fully disclose the source of their funding. A lot of money put into the presidential election by wealthy families. This is from the Americans for Tax Fairness. They put out this report in the closing days of the election. These are the billionaire families and which party they contributed to in 2024. You can see the first 6 families all contributed to Republicans. And then the Simons family that owns shopping malls, they're contributed to Democrats, along with the Bloomberg family giving $45.1 million to Democrats. Elon Musk, a name we've heard a lot, and how much he's contributed in this presidential cycle. He's third in that list, $133 million. Peter?
Let's hear from Andy, who's calling in from Michigan. He's a supporter of Kamala Harris. Andy, good evening. Why are you supporting the vice president?
Well, good evening to you, and glad you can take my call. A couple of things, and I'll just do them if I can without, I'm kind of upset about it. But anyway, food. If you think about what's going on with food, 5, 6 years ago, we'll just use Kroger's. They were paying their employees $8, $9, $10, maybe $12 an hour. Now you're paying them $15 to $18 an hour. So what do you think Kroger's is going to do with the price of food? They're either going to take the hit, they're going to lay people off, or they're going to raise prices. They're going to raise prices. Locally, crime. The presidents, neither one of them, have very little influence on crime locally. You can't tell the police how many people to arrest. You can't tell the prosecutors who to prosecute. And you can't tell the judges about how much sentences to give out. And the last thing that I just found out about the other day was soybeans, tariffs. The Japanese and the Chinese were buying soybeans from American farmers. When the tariffs hit, they started buying them from Brazil. Farmers are in trouble with that commodity. So I just don't think the presidents, either one, have a lot of control over a lot of things they're saying.
Hey, Andy.
And Americans are just...
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We got that point. Where in Michigan do you live?
I live in southeastern Michigan, suburb of Detroit.
Okay.
Oakland County.
Did you vote a straight Democratic ticket?
Yes.
And why Alyssa Slotkin? I know you talked about the nationalization of some of these issues, but why Alyssa Slotkin for Senate?
Because I think she's a better candidate than Rogers was.
What is an issue of concern to you besides the price of food, which you see as a local issue?
Well, again, crime is an issue, but the presidents of the United States, maybe I'm wrong, don't have very much control over that. You can't tell the local police, who to arrest. You can't tell them to do stop and frisk. You can't tell the prosecutors who to prosecute. And again, it's back to sentencing. So there's nothing the governor and the local people can handle that, but I don't see any input either president has over that. And when I started listening to these tariffs, we're in trouble. We're in big you-know-what with these tariffs. And I don't think Americans understand that.
Now, Andy, President Trump has spent a lot of time talking to the auto workers up there in Michigan. Both candidates have been up there quite a bit. What about the former president's message to the auto workers?
Well, again, I think some of them is misleading. If I remember right, he said something about jobs leaving Michigan, and I hope they beg for him to come back. He's not a union person. I mean, let's get real with that. Most Republicans are not, although they are affected by unions. Without unions, we wouldn't have the economy we have. We wouldn't have the middle class. So, some people hate LBJ. But just think if LBJ didn't get Medicaid and Medicare through, how a lot of it would be. Where would the Teamsters pension be if it wasn't for Democrats?
Andy, are you a union member?
No, I was a salary person. I started out as a union when I was in college. Then I got into management.
Thank you, Andy, for calling in. I'm going to have to leave it there. I appreciate it. Evan McMorris Santoro, what have you been hearing in our conversation with Greta and Kirk and Andy?
Well, we're hearing just this sort of conversation that we've been talking about, this economy focus that Andy was just bringing up, right? This has been such a huge part of this election conversation. I've been all over the country, talked to a lot of people, and I actually did a story a long time ago about inflation and what impact it might have. And we're seeing some of that sort of manifest itself in how everybody is really talking about this election. Andy talking about some of the frustrations Democrats have had with the way the economy has been discussed. They feel like maybe they're not getting a fair shake in the way that's being discussed. But this has really been a central issue. And I find it really fascinating to think about how strongly he has his views about this. And from Kirk, we're talking about this idea of this split ticket voting, which he mentions in Arizona is very possible there. But there is a chance that we see some of that other places as well. I traveled a lot around the country this year. I talked to a lot of folks, especially on this issue of when we're talking about this presidential race, where there were people who were planning to vote against Trump in a way. Like they didn't want to bring Trump back in, but they didn't consider themselves Democrats. And some of them would explain this to me by saying, look, I'm going to vote for the Republican for Senate. The Senate will prevent a Democratic President Harris from doing the sort of furthest things that she wants to do. We'll see how this manifests itself, but what Kirk is talking about when it comes to Arizona, it's something that I felt in my reporting around the country as I've been around all throughout the year.
Let's go back to Greta.
We have some wins to report in the state of West Virginia. The Associated Press has put the check mark next to the former president's name in the presidential contest. 4 electoral votes at stake. This is Trump country. In 2020, every county was red, but for one, and it was pink. Mr. Trump won by nearly 40 points. Moving on to the governor's race there, and the Associated Press has called Patrick Morrisey the victor tonight in that race, the Republican again winning that seat for the governor's race. It's left open because the very popular Governor Jim Justice ran for Senate this year. This is a pickup tonight for Republicans. It's been expected. In fact, the governor, Jim Justice, declared victory in October, saying that he was going to win this seat. And as we've talked about, Democrats have a thin majority, 51-49. With the check mark next to Jim Justice's name, it's 50-50 now. Peter?
Next call is Charles in Sydney, Ohio. Hi, Charles.
Hello.
Who did you support and why?
I supported Donald Trump. And the reason why is because he seems to be more with the common man. He has more reach with the normal, average, everyday person. He has lots of money, but, us people here on Main Street, we don't. And he's trying to help fix to where my family can afford food and fuel and still be able to do something fun on the weekend without having to go, what are we going to sacrifice? He's against the illegals coming in. He wants people to use the correct ports of entry, not put a ban on, immigration. This country was founded by immigrants. He's also for the Second Amendment, which coming from a farming community. A lot of us hunt. The man, because of the hatred, basically took a bullet for freedom. You have to say that is definitely to stay in the race, to keep going to the finish. I have to admire a man like that.
Hey,
who
Charles,
loves country.
I got to ask you about 2 issues. Number 1, the vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, is obviously from Ohio. And the issue of Springfield, Ohio, and immigration came up a lot in this campaign. Have you experienced an issue with immigration in Sydney, Ohio?
Yes, we have. There's several places here where the immigrants are, and it's turned our town somewhat unsafe in a few ways. But our law enforcement here with the sheriff's office and stuff has done a real good job at keeping us, safe. And the Springfield is quite a little distance from us, so we don't have too much problems from them. Some of these companies are hiring them and different things. One of the things I was worried about is them being able to cast ballots for our elections, which, could turn an election.
Charles, very quickly, who'd you vote for in the Senate race?
I honestly left that one blank.
Between Sherrod Brown and Mr. Marino?
I voted for Marino for that one.
Oh, for that one
Sorry.
you left. Okay. All right.
I left the other out.
All right. Charles in Sydney, Ohio, thanks for calling in. Let's quickly hear from Will. Will's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Kamala Harris supporter.
Hello,
Hey, Will.
greetings. Yes, sir. Greetings. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I live in Tulsa, which is kind of the blue bubble in a red state, and at least I hope so tonight. And my vote for Kamala Harris was more of a objection vote, or whatever you call it, a vote against Trump. I voted for Hillary Clinton, not a Hillary Clinton fan. But when I heard Trump's nonsense in 2015, 2016, I just couldn't vote for the man.
Do you consider yourself generally a Republican, Will, who does not like Donald Trump?
Yeah, but every one of us has conservative values on some issues. Every one of us has liberal or non-conservative values for some issues. So I think it's silly to vote for the party. I think it's much more important to vote for the person. I'm 62 years old. I voted for Reagan twice, and I voted for Obama twice. John McCain would have had my vote, except he brought on Sarah Palin, who I objected to. The reason he did is because the Republican Party thought Clinton was going to win the nomination, and she didn't. Obama won the nomination. So McCain would have got my vote, but I had to go with Obama because I vote for the person, not the party.
Thank you, Will, for calling in. Evan McMorris Santoro, what'd you hear from our last two callers?
Well, they mentioned Springfield, Ohio, where I actually traveled to. You mentioned Springfield, Ohio. I traveled to. I did some reporting there this year, and you're right. This immigration issue that was brought up by that caller, it's been so galvanizing for Republicans and for Trump supporters, specifically this year. But the Springfield moment was one of these issues that also kind of feeds into the second caller out of Tulsa, a guy who says, I have conservative values, I voted both different directions before, I vote for the person. In Springfield, Ohio, you had a situation where you have a town controlled by Republicans, Republican county commissioners, Republicans in charge of the place, and the Republican nominee for vice president, starts talking about these migrants, these Haitian migrants who are there. We all remember the sort of things that were said about what those migrants were doing. And you had the Republican leadership of that area sort of pushing back against their own party's presidential nominee and vice presidential nominee, right? These are the kind of Republicans who were a little bit upset with the way that the Trump campaign was behaving towards that issue and towards the town, to be perfectly frank, from my visit there and from my reporting there. And so it's really, this is such a perfect two callers to have back to back, because this is what we're talking about. You have these Trump voters who really respect the guy, and they're very motivated by this immigration issue. And then you have these other folks who are maybe conservative, maybe can think of, have been Republican in the past, who just can't get on board with some of the rhetoric and some of the ways that Trump operates. And this could really end up being a huge part of how this election plays out. How many people we have like our caller from Tulsa, and how many we have like our caller from Ohio, right? This could be a huge, huge division.
Greta Bronner, what do you have for us?
Let's check in on the presidential contest in a few states. We'll start with Georgia. This is a battleground state, one of those swing states. This is where it stands at this point, with 12% of the vote in. And you can see that the former president is leading there. Moving on to another swing state in North Carolina, 16 electoral votes at stake in North Carolina. Democrats haven't won North Carolina since Barack Obama did in 2008. This is where it stands right now. We will keep you updated on the race as the evening goes on. Moving on to the state of Virginia, flipped in
Republican problem right now. Her opponent in the primary got over 40%. She only won her first race 4 years ago by 6 votes, not 6 points. 6 individual votes in the closest race in the country 4 years ago. They think they have a real opportunity here with Christina Bohannon, and after spending zero in their last cycle, Democrats have spent about $10 million in that race and put Republicans on defense. This is all part of Democrats' bigger strategy, not just in Iowa, but in a lot of different races across the country that were maybe on the periphery of the battleground, but their cash advantage, as our House correspondent James Downs reported, has really allowed them to expand the battlefield into places like
So
Iowa,
people are really
into
passionate
places like
about
even
this election.
Nebraska
You know,
too,
you
where,
feel very strong. People are feeling very strong emotions about Trump or Harris, or, you know, so this is going to be a really, I guess, stressful election for a lot of people, depending on, you know, who you're voting for. And hopefully everybody did. So again, we're more than likely not going to know who won this election tonight. It could be days, could be a week, who knows, but at least we'll get a really good idea of where the election is headed. So let's get back to it, guys, and make sure you jump in, say hi, let me know who you are and where you're from.
Bacon's having a lot of trouble right now there. There's a lot of ways that Democrats' financial advantage has enabled them to invest in these races and have Republicans divert resources there.
Now, Kirk, you mentioned that Dr. Miller Meeks had a Republican problem. Did her opponent in the primary run to the right of her?
A little bit to the right, but he didn't really campaign a whole lot either. I mean, this was a little bit more of a protest vote against Miller Meeks. He didn't spend a whole lot of money, and he ran a little bit more to the right of her. So she's really struggled to consolidate the Republican Party behind her. And if the Seltzer poll does prove out and that Harris is leading by 3 points in Iowa, this is one of those races, along with the Zach Nunn race as well in Iowa's 3rd, where we could see some surprising Democratic pickups.
Well, there are 2 races in Virginia where the polls have closed. Let's begin with House District 2 down in Virginia Beach.
Yeah, so these 2 races here, Virginia 7 and Virginia 2, are kind of our early bellwethers to see how not only the race for the House is going to go, but potentially even the presidential race as well. Now, freshman Republican Rep. Jen Kiggins represents Virginia 2 in Virginia Beach. Republicans are feeling confident about their chances there because the Democrat there hasn't really kept pace with fundraising until the last few months here. But if Democrats do end up flipping this one, this is a race where Mike Johnson and other Republican leaders have spent a lot of time in the closing weeks just shoring this one up. If Democrats do flip this one and keep Virginia 7, they have the wind at their back going in for the rest of election night here. They're really fired up about this race. Again, it's not doom and gloom for Democrats, though, if they can't flip this. But if they do, Republicans are going to be panicking a little bit early on in the night.
And you mentioned Virginia 7. Abigail Spanberger, who has that seat now, has elected not to run for re-election. She's running for governor. It's Eugene Vidman, and people might remember that name, a Democrat, versus Derek Anderson, former Navy SEAL. That district is between Washington and Richmond. Is it considered a swing district, Kirk Beto?
Not as much as it was before redistricting or even last year, but it is a competitive open seat. Now, the way Republicans were able to flip the House 2 years ago is by picking up a lot of those open seats. It's a lot easier to flip an open seat than it is to knock off an incumbent. Now, Abigail Spanberger is running for governor now, like you said. She was one of the all-star kind of Democratic members, a great fundraiser, a more moderate member, someone who's won in battleground districts before. And without her there, Democrats are a little bit worried about this. But just like Virginia 2, if Republicans...
So this is a crypto channel for those of you who are not aware, and for whatever reasons, however you want to look at it, both sides, both candidates have expressed their interest in moving cryptocurrency forward. I'd probably say that Donald Trump has been more vocal when it comes to like adoption of Bitcoin and, having crypto be like, not, have some regulations in place and just creating I guess more of like more what we are, more regulations, more specifics about what crypto is, what it's not, and just, creating that. And I believe Kamala Harris has done similar things about Bitcoin. So this is important for the country politically where we're going. And then also will also give us an idea of where we're going with crypto adoption moving forward. So if you're wondering, well, this is a crypto channel, why is he talking about the election? Because one, all this plays into itself. It's everything's symbiotic, right? So depending on, who will become elected and, what they're going to do to move crypto forward, hopefully, then that plays a big influence for all of us or everyone here. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to live stream this. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to be doing it every now and then just to give some context or explain a few things, or even just to say hi, where you're from. We're getting a lot of the talking heads and everyone's, analyzing things, and they're calling states for candidates, and there hasn't been any any votes coming in or any numbers coming in. But I want to have all of us come together so that way we know what's going on and that we're educated. So let's get back to it, folks.
Do flip this, then they're going to be feeling great. Then they'll probably have defended Virginia 2. If they flip Virginia 7, they're going to have the wind at their back going into the rest of the night here. But if Democrats keep it in their column, it's not like Republicans are writing off their chances of keeping the House here. It would be really nice to have, be a very early indicator of maybe some of these other reach districts or ones that they thought might be, not layups, not gimmies or anything like that. There are very few of those on the map right now. But if Republicans flip Virginia 7, they got to be feeling great. And if you're in the DC media market, you've probably been inundated with these ads right now, not only from Eugene Vidman, but also from Derek Anderson and his outside groups as well.
Evan McMorris Santoro, speaking of Eugene Vidman, I've noticed in his ads, he has not mentioned President Trump in the sense of his involvement with President Trump's impeachment in 2017.
That's really interesting, actually, to hear. I just want to quickly say, Kirk, I mean, I used to work at the hotline years ago. I never worked there with Kirk, but what a master. I mean, if you're not watching C-SPAN, you're doing it wrong. I mean, everything is just coming in from this guy. It's really, really fascinating stuff. In terms of this ad messaging that you're talking about, we've seen very interesting, unexpected ad messaging all over the country. My colleague Riley Rogerson just did a story about how COVID really hasn't been much of the conversation throughout this entire election. That was a pretty big deal the last time people voted. And there's been a lot of other issues like that really have not risen to the top in the way that you would have necessarily expected. And that's because these candidates are running on the big issues that they think are really motivating voters. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about democracy. We're talking about these other things that, interestingly, stuff that you might not have expected has been pushed to the wayside. And another colleague of mine wrote an interesting article about the Missouri Senate race, not a particularly competitive Senate race that we're planning on, but interestingly, right, Josh Hawley, the incumbent there, was sort of a big photograph figure from January 6th. January 6th was not much of the conversation in that Senate race either, right? Like we are seeing candidates sort of shifting away from the things you might have expected that they would have run on even a year ago, even 6 months ago, to sort of meet this moment of where the voters where they are.
Well, it is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the East Coast. More polls closing. Here we go. Alabama, Connecticut, Delaware, District of Columbia, Florida, which also has a Senate race, Illinois, Maine, very interesting state because they split their electoral votes and there's a competitive House race there. Maryland has a Senate seat, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Missouri, that we just mentioned, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, which of course is very interesting, has now closed. Their polls are closed. Rhode Island, Tennessee. Greta Bronner, what can you tell us?
You mentioned the polls in Florida, and all the polls have closed in that state. Let's start with the presidential contest and take a look at this. Over 80%, a little over 80% of the vote is in the state of Florida. 30 electoral votes are at stake here, and this is where the contest stands at this point. The former president with a sizable lead with 81% of the vote in. We've also had some calls in the state of Florida in two competitive House races tonight, and they both go to Republicans. Let's start with Florida's 13th congressional district. And this is, in this seat, the Republican incumbent, the congresswoman there. This is a lean Republican race. She is declared the winner there. And then in the Florida's 27th district, the incumbent Republican, Congresswoman Salazar, also the victor. This was likely Republican. So two calls there in Florida tonight.
McMorris Santoro, Florida, when you saw those percentages, you kind
It
of
didn't go to air.
You kind of nodded your head.
Well, I think that Florida was a dream reach for the Democrats for a lot of this election cycle. There was, my colleague Claire Heddles was down there just the other day knocking doors with Hillary Clinton as she was trying to drum up some Democratic vote down there. It's a hard state for Democrats these days. They have not really been competitive there in a little while. And so seeing those numbers coming in the way they are, it's not a huge surprise. It's, of course, where Trump lives. This is sort of, it's not a place I expect to see a lot. You mentioned that Luna race. She's done a lot. She's been very vocal lately on some of the more, some of the more conspiratorial stuff around some of these hurricanes and things like that. She's a big sort of media star in the Republican Party. Those people have done fairly well in Florida lately.
Let's talk to Lee in Santa Clarita, California, a Harris supporter. Hi, Lee. Lee, you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Please go ahead and tell us what you wanted to say tonight.
Taking the call. Yes, I most definitely did vote for Ms. Harris.
Why'd you vote for Kamala Harris,
this
Lee?
year? I could not. By the way, it's kind of breaking up. So if I'm breaking up, let me know.
Hey, Lee, just go ahead and tell us why you. Lee, just go ahead and tell us why you voted for Kamala Harris.
I did vote. I could not vote for Mike Garcia because of the action he took on the 6th with the other 140. I'd hate to see what would happen if our votes did not count. And that's tough to say as a lifetime Republican. So I did go with George Whiteside. I'm a little disappointed with the MAGA, or I should say my Republican Party, the MAGA, just non-MAGA over here. We just need to bring some dignity back to the office, some couth, some decor.
Thank you, Lee, for calling in. We appreciate that. Lee is not a MAGA fan, but he considers himself to be a Republican, and California's got some pretty important House races, doesn't it?
That's right. We talked about, Kirk was mentioning this as well. We talked about this idea of this is a place where some of these areas that had been gone blue, had been red for a long time, gone blue again. We've seen maybe a chance for Republicans to pick some of them up in California as part of they try to get their House majority, maintain their House majority into next year. It's interesting to hear him describe his feelings and how he approaches politics at this moment. It really is something I've heard so much out on the campaign trail, which is folks who, before President Biden dropped out and Vice President Harris took over as a Democratic nominee, there was a lot of sort of exhaustion at the way, at this idea of this rematch between a kind of politics people didn't really like and a politician that they thought was maybe too old. And now with Harrison, we've seen some of that, this sort of, some of the more divisive aspects of MAGA really follow Trump around.
Greta Bronner.
Quick update for you, Peter. The state of Florida has been called for the former president. The Associated Press putting the red check next to his name tonight. 82% of the votes in there.
Supporter. Hi, Grant.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you?
Good, good.
What's on your mind?
I just generally think that, a big issue in this election is the Second Amendment. I know both of the candidates have made their minds very clear. Trump is, seemingly on the pro-Second Amendment side of everything, while Kamala Harris has clearly expressed that she wants to restrict that a lot. She's said she wants to ban assault weapons, high-capacity magazines and stuff like that. And there are many Americans like myself who own stuff like that and really care about that. So I think that's going to turn off a lot of rural voters who really care about something like that. That's sort of what's on my mind is my main issue. But, the economy as well, with just how inflation's been going and how that's been handled. I think that, Trump brings to the table some really good economic policy with, tariffs to foreign nations that want to compete with our goods and lowering taxes. So I think that could, drive a lot of people to vote on his side versus Harris. So.
Grant, have you supported President Trump in past elections?
I'm sorry, you're cutting out.
Grant, have you supported President Trump in past elections? I apologize. I'm not sure if we kept him on there or not, but it was a little difficult to hear him, and I apologize to you, Grant. Gary in Redding, California, Kamala Harris line. Hi.
Hello? Hello?
You know what? Is Gary there, please? You know what? Hey, a reminder. For some reason, I guess I'm cutting out because that's two viewers in a row who said they were having a little trouble hearing me. So I apologize to those viewers if you could not hear us correctly. Let's talk to Janet. Janet is in Springfield, Ohio, which obviously was in the news during this election cycle. Hi, Janet. All right, we're having just a bit of trouble here with the phones. I apologize. We'll get that taken care of. Evan McMorris Santoro, are you seeing anything, hearing anything surprising with what you're hearing from the callers and the results so far?
Well, the callers, I think, are very carefully considering these votes that they are casting. You talk about that Second Amendment issue that was just brought up. This is a hugely important issue to a lot of people. You saw Democrats actually trying to make a case that they actually have some Second Amendment credibility, and they would like to sort of win some of those voters back. He mentions rural voters. That's just one of the issues. You saw Vice President Harris talk about her own gun that she owns, her willingness to use it if an intruder were to get into her home. Difficult to imagine given where she currently lives and the security that's around it, but nevertheless, there has been a conversation among Democrats trying to do something about the Second Amendment issue. They are aware that they have a hard time with voters who that's their number one thing. So I've been quite fascinated to hear just how careful people are considering this stuff and how much they have been thinking about this election. Right, that's quite interesting. I will say that we have continued to hear us reporters have continued to hear from the Harris campaign that. We're waiting for all of these results to come in. We're waiting for things that we're waiting to find out what's going on. We haven't seen these big numbers from a lot of these states yet, trickling in still these important states. But the Harris campaign has been sort of continually feeding us a lot of conversation about things that they feel very good about, that they feel good about. For example, long lines at the colleges in Nevada, right, where they think that those voters are going to go for them. We just heard that they feel like Philadelphia, which is that huge vote basket that they need in Pennsylvania, right? The way Pennsylvania works for Democrats is they need to really boost the vote up in Philadelphia, and that overcomes the red areas around Pennsylvania, essentially, right? They're feeling like they are seeing some of those numbers come in. Again, this is all so early, but this is what the campaign is telling us and what they are thinking that they are feeling and they're seeing around as they watch these results come in.
Let's get more results from Greta Brawner.
one of these candidates needs to clinch 270 electoral votes of the 538 tonight to be declared the winner. On the left of your screen, we're keeping track for you where it stands. And right now, the former president with 95 electoral votes and the vice president with 35. Here are some states that are in the blue column tonight. The Associated Press calling the states of Maryland, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. And as we click through, you can see where the vote percentage is at this point with 0 votes in, but the Associated Press feels there's no path for the former president, to catch her at this point, so they put that check mark next to her name. Peter?
Let's go back. Let's see if the phones are working. Abigail, Wildwood, New Jersey. Abigail, can you hear me and tell us how you voted?
Trump one?
Yes. Hi. Okay. I voted at the polls today.
Okay.
And I voted for Robert F. Kennedy.
You did, even though he endorsed former President Trump.
You know, I'm not a big fan of this Democrat and Republican back and forth. I really think that we should be voting third-party independent in order to take away power from these guys that are leveraging it against the American people.
Abigail, thank you for calling in. Greta Bronner, do you have more for us?
Not much to say. Yes, we want to.
All right, I got to cut in on this one because as this woman was talking about voting for Robert F. Kennedy, being that he's an independent, and then she hadn't even finished saying about why she voted independent, and I agree with her, they cut off her phone and just blew that call right off. So that's bugging me because she's right. I mean, when you have, at least in my opinion, you're here watching this, so you're going to get my opinion. When you have these two parties, the Democrats and Republicans, they're like the two teams, right? And then you can't have anyone else like conflict with those two teams or compete with those two teams. I don't. That for some reason that just really irked me. I wish they would have given this woman some value of why she didn't vote for either one. So anyway, that's just my opinion. Thought I'd share that with you guys. Let's get back to it.
I'll show you some states that are in the red column tonight. We'll go through a number of them, starting with Mississippi. 6 electoral votes at stake in Mississippi. And all of these states we're about to go through have gone for the former president. There's Alabama on your screen. Moving on to Oklahoma. The former president wins Oklahoma as well. 7 electoral votes at stake in Oklahoma. In Tennessee, he also is declared the victor in that state, and in Kentucky and in South Carolina. So the South, these 6 states in the South, all going to the former president tonight. Peter?
Evan McMorris Santoro of Notice News of the United States is here with us this evening. He'll be with us for a couple more hours. Thank you very much.
Having time of my life.
C-SPAN on election night is live for 17 hours. We have the magic board on top of this. This is cspan.org/results. If you go there, you get your own magic board, county by county, that is updated continuously. The results come from the Associated Press. Evan, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you were getting continuous reporter feeds from the Harris campaign. Are you getting them from the Trump campaign as well?
The Trump campaign has not been as direct with us about this sort of thing. They have talked a lot about things that they feel good about. We've seen, the president, the former president, using his own social media platform to put out his sort of views. There were some conversations that he put out earlier feeling like maybe there was something going wrong with voting in Philadelphia. We saw Philadelphia officials say that's not true. There's a lot of back and forth going on. The Harris campaign has a much more traditional and a lot of folks think much larger ground operation. Doesn't mean that they're going to win tonight. Doesn't mean that that's going to put them over the top or anything like that. But they have the kind of operation where they are checking a lot of things very closely on a granular level, and they can feed back some of that information. Obviously, information that they want us reporters to see. That's very clear, right? But they can do that. The Trump campaign has relied on a different kind of ground operation. They have a lot of outside help. We've heard about Elon Musk is doing a lot of things of his own. Charlie Kirk is doing things on his own. It just isn't the sort of it's not the similar organized structure. The Republican Party has their own system. They're out there too. But when it comes to this, this election has been a lot about at the presidential level about a massive sort of organized Democratic ground game. They're hoping to rely on in this close race tonight.
Nancy is calling from Rotunda, West Florida, a Trump voter. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you very much for your coverage tonight. I really enjoy C-SPAN.
Now, Nancy, did you vote straight Republican or were you a ticket splitter?
No, I'm straight Republican.
Why do you support President Trump?
Title IX, border security, and the economy.
Have you seen where is Rotunda, West Florida, by the way?
We're south of Venice and north of Punta Gorda.
Okay. So you're on the Gulf side?
Yes.
Have you seen
9 miles from the Gulf.
Have you seen an impact from immigration?
Well, not here directly, but throughout the country. I just believe our border should be secure, and we should know who's entering the country.
Nancy, thank you.
And I'm not against.
Go ahead.
I'm not against immigration. I just want it legal.
Thank you, ma'am, for calling in. Greta Bronner has more results.
Let's check in on some Midwest states, beginning with the state of Ohio. It releases its pre-election day votes first thing on election night, including mail-in votes. Like in other races since 2022, mail-in votes tended to lean toward Democrats. As the election day votes trickled in, though, in 2022, then Republican Senate candidate J.D. Vance took the lead, and he eventually won in the state of Ohio. This is where it stands right now, with the vice president having a slight lead with 34% of the vote in. Moving on to Michigan, one of those 7 battleground states. 15 electoral votes at stake here. There's 2% of the vote in. We could see a slight red mirage in Michigan as smaller, more pro-Republican localities report their votes. You can see, though, here it's looking not that way. There's only 2% of the vote in. So we'll see what happens as the votes come in more in the state of Michigan. Right now, the vice president with a sizable lead, but only 2% of the vote in. Moving on to the state of Pennsylvania. And you can see here with 6% of the vote in, again, the vice president has the lead. This could be an early blue mirage. We just have to wait and see because mail-in votes are counted first, and then they get to in-person election day votes, and those are reported in Pennsylvania.
Well, Kirk Beto is the editor-in-chief at the Hotline, and he is back with us to talk about some of those House races in Pennsylvania. Kirk, can we start in Pennsylvania 7? Have we seen anything yet to give us a trend?
We're still waiting on a little bit more returns in there. Again, Pennsylvania counts ballots very slowly. They're not allowed to pre-process early votes. So we're waiting a little bit longer to see some results in the Pennsylvania 7th district. But Susan Wild is kind of on the periphery of being one of the most competitive races in the country right now. It's a tough district for Democrats, but Wild has proven time and time again that she has a lot of resilience. She fundraises really well. She's out fundraised and outspent her Republican opponent. You know, stop me if you've heard this before, but Democrats have a great cash advantage all across the map, and it's been keeping their most vulnerable members a little bit, giving them a little bit more cushion, and like we said earlier, pushing Republicans back on defense in a lot of those reach seats. So we're still waiting on more data right now out of Pennsylvania.
And what about Pennsylvania 8? What should we be watching there?
Pennsylvania 8 is going to be probably one of the most competitive races in the country. It's in the top 20 races that we identified as most likely to flip. Rep. Matt Cartwright represents the Scranton area, and it's one of the 5 districts represented by a Democrat that voted for former President Trump. Those, as we said earlier, those split ticket races are always the toughest. In fact, less than about 3% of all House districts in the country are crossover members. This has been one of the top offensive targets for Republicans almost every cycle for the last 4 years or so, or since Pennsylvania redrew their lines in 2018. But again, Cartwright has dominated the airwaves. This is an area where Democrats are a little bit more worried about, though, because Harris has struggled in areas like Scranton in ways that that President Biden, who was jokingly called the 3rd senator from Pennsylvania, performed really well, and Harris is not matching those numbers right now. So that's going to be one of our top races to watch here in the coming hours, if not a few days, depending on how long it takes Pennsylvania to count its votes.
Kirk Beto, there's a 3rd Democratic incumbent seat that is competitive, and this is up in Maine.
Yes, it's the Maine district, Jared Golden. That is another one of those 5 seats that's represented by a Democrat that Trump carried. Now, Jared Golden is in kind of the race for his life right now. He flipped the seat in 2018, kept it in 2022, and he is really having the race for his life right now. The last polls that we saw here found him tied with his Republican opponent. Now, this has been, again, another top priority for Republicans. If Republicans want to keep and maybe even expand their majority, they're gonna need to win Maine 2 right now. And again, because Maine splits its congressional votes, this is an area where Trump won, like we said, and it's going to be difficult for Jared Golden. Coming into Election Day, this is probably one of his worst polls of the last 4 cycles. If it's tied in there, the tie almost has to go to the runner, which in this case is the Republican, because Trump's going to probably end up carrying this district.
Hey, Kirk Beto, I know we don't have it listed for you, but in the Harrisburg area of Pennsylvania, Scott Perry, there's been some rumor that he is in trouble. Freedom Caucus member, Republican.
Yes, there is actually, and this is one of the ones that Democrats have just been so frustrated by for the last few cycles, because they see a guy like Scott Perry, a member of the House Freedom Caucus, like you said, who goes around saying, I didn't come here in Washington to make friends here, a guy who's been a little bit out of step with what we were seeing, the bluing of the Harrisburg area as more college-educated folks come live and stay in and around that area of the country. Now, the diploma divide has been kind of the story of politics in the Trump era, that if the higher education level you have, the more likely you are to vote for a Democrat. And this is one of those areas that has frustrated Democrats because they see an influx of more highly educated voters move into the Harrisburg area, but they haven't been able to knock off Scott Perry. But they think that with Janelle Stelson, who was a former longtime TV anchor in the district, that they can finally get Perry here. This is one of those rare instances where January 6th and threats about democracy have trickled down to House races. Evan said earlier really well that we haven't really seen Democrats lean into that message as much. It's been more about the economy and abortion access. But this is one of those areas where the Democrat in a House race is really leaning into that because of Scott Perry's involvement with the Stop the Steal movement.
Well, Greta Bronner and I will be here until 3 a.m. this morning, and let's check in with Greta right now.
Let's dig into some competitive Senate races beginning in Ohio. As we said before, Republicans are eyeing this seat held by Senator Sherrod Brown, the Democrat there. He wants a 4th term. Bernie Moreno's trying to stop him. 30% of the vote in. Look how tight this is. This is a potential pickup for Republicans to flip the upper chamber. Moving on to Pennsylvania, another tight race we're expecting here. But right now, with 7% of the vote in, look at Senator Bob Casey's lead. Again, this is only 7% of the votes are in. And as we said, Pennsylvania, They report the earliest reported votes to be dominated by mail ballots, so this could cause an early blue mirage. We're going to keep you updated on that competitive Senate race in Pennsylvania. And then moving on to Michigan. This is another battleground state with a competitive Senate race in it as well. Alyssa Slotkin is eyeing this seat, once held by the Democrat Debbie Stabenow, who decided to retire and not go for another term. The Republican challenger here is Mike Rogers, Republican, former FBI agent, former member of Congress. Outside spending by this group and candidate spending totaled $205 million. Peter?
You know, Evan McMorris Santoro, every time Greta mentions a state, I go to our cspan.org/results and I'll drill down into the counties in that state, and I'm paying no attention to what I'm doing here, so I apologize for that. But let's take Pennsylvania for an example. She showed the big lead that Bob Casey has. I went onto the map, I clicked on Pennsylvania, and you can see that the votes that have come in so far are from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia.
Right, that's the blue, red in the middle, that's Pennsylvania. But the thunderclap that you hear right now is the fact that we're talking about Pennsylvania results, okay? All year we have been waiting to see what happens in Pennsylvania, and now we are seeing votes actually come in. This is a very big deal. This is like the biggest deal for people who've been following this election. It'll be a long time till we know, and as you mentioned, I think it's really smart for people to remember this, that when these votes are ticking in, it doesn't really matter till we know what they all are, right? That's where those AP calls are based on a lot of things. People who are following a lot of other things. Wait till that before you make any conclusions based on what you're looking at with these numbers coming in. But the fact that we're talking about Pennsylvania and we're talking about Michigan now, we are really in the meat of this election now. These are the states that are extremely important to deciding who the next president is going to be, right? It's been fascinating to sit here with you and talk with the callers and watch this whole place come in, because I think about the rest of the country where there's so much election going on that people are going to the polls, they're showing up, Connecticut, whatever, Rhode Island, whatever, but we are really in the thing now that will decide it. And so it's like exciting for me personally to start to see it come in, but also this is the moment where we really have to be very careful when we talk about results, because we just don't know what they mean yet.
Yeah, and I need to put this away because I'm spending all my time over here and not paying attention
I think
to
you're doing a great
anything else,
job.
So I apologize to everybody for that. Laura is up in Douglas, Alaska, a Harris supporter. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Where is Douglas, Alaska? Are you close to Anchorage?
Nope, Juneau. I'm in the southeast Alaska. It's a little island right off of Juneau, Alaska.
All right. So what was the voting experience for you up there in a ranked choice voting state?
Easy peasy. They actually had a lot of pamphlets that came out, a lot of information. I got a text message a few days ago about where my polling place was going to be. It was actually pretty nice. And the ranked choice voting was a different experience. I was born and raised in upstate New York, actually, so this is the first time I've done a ranked choice voting, especially in a presidential election, but it wasn't that complicated. They had a lot of information out there about how that works and what to do and exactly how to fill out your form to make sure that each ranked choice was counted.
Now, Laura, you couldn't rank choice on the presidential level, could you? It's just on the state level.
No, you could do it on the presidential level.
Okay. Did you rank choice, or did you just mark Kamala Harris on your ballot?
Nope. I just marked Kamala Harris on the ballot, one and only.
But you could have ranked Kamala Harris and Donald Trump as your second choice?
I could have, but I never would have.
Right. I understand. What about Mary Peltola? Because there's some talk that she might be in a little bit of trouble because the Republicans have kind of grouped together up there.
Yeah, I voted for Mary Peltola. She's done a great job. She's pro-choice. She's pro-job. She's pro-family. She's got kids in the Coast Guard here, and so she's very pro-Alaska, pro-fishing, pro-hunting, all of that kind of stuff. So I voted for Mary. I hope that is where we're headed still. She's done a great job, and I hope she can continue that, but we'll see.
Did you put a second choice after Congresswoman Peltola?
I did not. I voted for Mary Patola straight through.
And I got to ask you, is there a lot of sign of a presidential campaign up in Alaska right now? Just because of the remoteness.
I've seen two Trump signs, and that's it. Again, coming from upstate New York, that is shocking. Where people talk about politics all the time. Here, it is not a conversation. People don't have signs in their yard. We don't talk about it. I have no idea who my neighbors and that kind of stuff are voting for. We just vote and move on with our way because, like you said, we have small populations and small communities, so we got to live together.
Thank you, ma'am, for calling in. Do you live in Alaska year-round?
Yes, I do.
What do you do?
I work for the Forest Service.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Evan, that ranked choice voting, is it working as far as voters? Do voters like it? It's on the ballot in a couple of different states, isn't it?
Yeah, I think also here in D.C., right? People who have voted on ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
It is one of these reform issues that the reason for it is the idea of ranked choice voting is that it lets people vote for maybe some of those other, third-party candidates or candidates that might not do as well that they would normally not want to vote for, right? This idea of like, I don't want to throw my vote away, but in this case, you could go in and mark down a different kind of candidate. I know that the parties have not been thrilled with it. I mean, voters have passed it in several, places and added it to their ballots in several places. But we've seen the parties sort of organize, both sides sort of organize against it, not really liking it. Because the idea is it really is supposed to create a way to kind of break the control of just the two parties, right? Gives other people a chance to maybe be a part of things. Some places, Alaska specifically, we've seen some pushback against ranked choice voting because of some of the results that have come out of there. We've seen Republicans be not happy with having this system anymore and maybe talking about reforming it. And other places that are voting on it, we've seen those arguments, again, from both sides about what to do. I don't know. I mean, I have not talked to a lot of voters about the experience of voting on ranked choice voting. I will say I've talked to a lot of voters about the desire to be able to cast votes outside of the two-party system. I mean, you hear this all the time when you go out in the world. Why is there only two? Why can't I think of something else? Why can't I vote for something else? And of course you can, but people know that if they do, it doesn't really have much impact. This is a chance maybe to give it some impact. So, again, without having to spoke to people about the actual sort of like process of it, it does speak to a desire that a lot of voters have that I have found on the road.
Well, 1 a.m. Eastern Time is when the polls close in Alaska, and so we'll get an update on Mary Peltola's race at that point. But it is 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. The polls have closed in Arkansas. It's the only state that closes at 8:30. Let's return to Greta Bronner and see what she has for us.
Let's check in on the state of New Hampshire, starting with the presidential race there. In the closing days of this campaign, we saw the race tighten in New Hampshire, and even the running mate of the former president, J.D. Vance, heading to Derry, New Hampshire, holding a rally there over the weekend with just days to go before the election. And this is the way where it stands right now with 19% of the vote in. You can see that the vice president leading there now. We'll continue to check in on New Hampshire to see if the polls were correct and this tightens up. 4 electoral college votes at stake there. And then we want to show you a competitive House race in the state of New Hampshire. Annie Kuster, the Democrat, retired from this seat, decided not to seek another term, retired after 6 terms. You can see the Democrat there in this contest leading by about 20 percentage points right now with 19% of the vote in. Peter?
Let's return to calls. We want to hear your voices throughout the evening, and Bill is in Goodwin, North Carolina. Bill, good evening to you.
Good evening. My name is Bill, but my real name is Garrett. Bill's my nickname, but yes, I voted for Donald Trump. I think this country is going downhill with the recent work of Kamala and Joe. I really think we need somebody to really fix the issues, especially in my state, with all the work and stuff that's going on.
Hey, Bill, where is Godwin, North Carolina?
It is close to Fayetteville in Raleigh.
Okay, near Raleigh.
Yeah, like kind of like 30 or 40 miles away from Raleigh. It's close to Fayetteville.
Has it been an active campaign season in North Carolina?
Yes, it has. I've seen a lot of signs for both Trump, Harris, and then the different governors and Senate. You know, it's been a real active race. Like, this is my first year to vote, and I just got my ID a couple of weeks ago, so I was pretty excited to vote.
Well, congratulations. Did you vote for the Republican nominee for governor in North Carolina, Mark Robinson?
I did not. I think he wouldn't do as good of a job as Josh Stein, so I voted for Josh Stein.
Bill, what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm unemployed. I'm only 18, but right now I've been helping like my family and neighbors, you know, trying to be a good neighbor.
We really appreciate you calling in. We appreciate you being with us on election night here on C-SPAN. Evan McMorris Santoro, we haven't really mentioned the governor's race in North Carolina yet.
Another one of those ticket splitting opportunities, really. Mark Robinson, as you mentioned, he was a kind of a big deal. He's a sitting lieutenant governor of the state. A big deal when he got the nomination. He spoke at the RNC convention over the summer, and then he sort of suffered a just cavalcade of scandals sort of towards the end of the campaign that has now shifted things away. You know, the National Party pulled their money out. A lot of his staff quit. This is not a person that people are expecting to do very well tonight, even though it's a state that's very competitive and that Trump could easily win. It's interesting to hear the caller. He sort of embodies two separate things about this. One, this Stein, voting for Stein and the Republican as well, but also this idea of these young men voters showing, these younger voters, first-time voters coming out. This is something that both campaigns have worked really hard to get their hands on. Trump has really wanted a lot of them to come out. So people casting their first ballot. Also, I just try to think about, could there be a more different experience in this election than being in a swing state like North Carolina versus that woman in Alaska who, she's seeing no signs, she's seeing no ads. People in North Carolina are seeing a lot of ads and a lot of signs, and I bet a lot of them would like to be in Alaska right now.
Well, let's talk to Ben in Champaign, Illinois, a Harris supporter. Hi, Ben.
Hi, how's it going?
How are you?
I'm doing well. I voted for Harris a couple days ago via mail, and I'm very excited for this election. About to go watch the rest of it with a couple of my friends.
Now, Ben, the mail-in process in Illinois, easy?
Very easy. Just got the ballot, checked out my judges to see which ones are the good ones, which ones are the bad ones, and got it done in 15 minutes.
Are you associated with the university there in Champaign?
Yeah, I'm currently a law student, so I'm going with a bunch of my friends tonight.
Do you see any evidence, being in a university town in Illinois, of Trump supporters?
I drive around my town every once in a while. I think I've seen one or two Trump signs around here, so really not too much, honestly.
But overwhelmingly Kamala Harris?
Yeah, I'd say like 20-1 on the signs or so. Pretty blue area, I think.
Is your governor popular down there in Champaign, J.B. Pritzker?
I don't know. I'm originally from up north in Chicago, and he's very popular up there. But around here, I think so. I think JB's been really well liked. He's a very strong overall.
Ben, thanks for watching. Thanks for checking in with us. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.
Greta Bronner has more results.
More states have been called by the Associated Press. Let's start with the state of Arkansas. Tonight, 9% of the vote in, and you can see that the vice president is leading there, but the Associated Press is calling this for the former president. He's won this state before, and the Associated Press feels there's no way that the vice president can win the state of Arkansas, so they've put the check next to his name. Moving on to the state of New Jersey, and this one has also been called tonight for the vice president with 28% of the vote in. Those percentages will change as more of the votes come in, but again, the Associated Press feels confident in their call with the thousands of people that they have working tonight at the Associated Press, looking at all the data that's coming in. They feel confident to call this for the vice president. And then another race in Delaware. This one has been called as well tonight for the vice president. She is declared the victor with 43% of the vote in. And finally, let's go to the state of Kansas tonight. We're watching this state right now to see what happens. 8% of the vote in, and you can see it's tight. If you go to our map on cspan.org/results and you look at where the votes are coming in, you can see large amounts of the votes coming in Kansas City and Topeka at this point in the night, and that is why the race looks tight in the state of Kansas. Peter?
Evan, I wanted to ask you about Kansas while Greta has that pulled up. There was a little bit of a feint toward Kansas saying, hey, this is in single digits, it's tight. And then, of course, we saw the Iowa. Was this purposeful? Was this outlier polls?
I feel like we're having like a brain melt here, because I was about to bring up that, one of the biggest moments of the last week of this campaign was this Ann Seltzer poll in Iowa, which showed that, Kamala Harris up by 3 points, huge swing, very surprising. A place like Kansas could show us, again, it's very early, results are very early, we don't know what these results say yet, but a place like Kansas could show us if that Seltzer poll is a real thing, and if it is a real thing that's like farther out into the Midwest, just besides Iowa, right? Kansas is a place that, like Iowa, a lot of people, when they talk about that Iowa poll, they're thinking that the very restrictive abortion law that's now in effect in Iowa could have had an effect on some polling there, right? And the way voters feel. Obviously, Kansas is a place where it was one of the earliest places that we learned kind of what a liability Dobbs could be for Republicans when in a special election in Kansas, not a place we think about for Democrats doing very well or the left doing very well or anything like that. They won a special election about abortion rights there. So this is a place where, again, we're waiting for these numbers to come in, see what they are. But that Seltzer poll question, which is a big question for those of us who watch this stuff, how accurate is that poll? Is that the right poll, or is every other poll the right poll? That is a state where we could maybe see some answers to that.
And to go back to Kansas, didn't Kansas already have a referendum on the issue of abortion and reproductive rights?
That's right, and that's what I was saying, is that it was one of the early ones in the post-Dobbs world, the special election that sort of fueled this idea that this is a very dangerous political liability for Republicans. It's a very tough one for them to overcome. That was one of the states where we saw that conversation. But of course, it has now been dealt with, so maybe it won't be as motivating. But I'm just saying, this idea of what the Seltzer poll is supposed to be showing us is that maybe there is places in the Midwest that things might look a little different. Again, we don't know yet, but that's sort of what that's what we're looking for in places like that.
Well, in 20 minutes, a couple of the swing states polls close, Arizona and Michigan. I wanted to ask you, we're already getting results from Michigan. How is that possible? The polls haven't even closed there. Well, is it probably the mail-in votes that they've started counting?
That is right. Some of these are, we talked about how long it has taken. Greta showed that thing earlier about how late it has been some nights before we get these results in. Nights, I mean like days, But a lot of states have changed their laws around this. We feel like, for example, in Georgia, they're counting their mail-in votes and their early votes like much quicker now in an attempt to try and get their results out faster. And places like Michigan, they're counting those votes. They've made some changes to their voting laws as well in recent years, and they're trying to get those votes in counted fast.
Lupe in Palmdale, California, Trump voter.
Hey, guys, thank you so much for taking my call. I actually voted Donald Trump. And I did for many reasons, but one of the main reasons is I believe that Donald Trump has the ability to address some of the Project 2025 with poise and implement some type of institution reform, and addressing some of the government corruption that not only he's experienced, but we're seeing America experience more and more indictments and a lot of more corruption for one reason or another. And I think that with Project 2025, I think that he has the ability to address it.
Lupe, you were the first person to bring up Project 2025 tonight. It's something that the Democrats talked quite a bit about. What is it about Donald Trump? Have you supported him in the past?
I have not, but I'm an entrepreneur. and I had a company that was pre-IPO, and I've dealt with the SEC and some of their shenanigans, and I know that Donald Trump has dealt with some of the same, and so has Elon Musk, and I think that a lot of the Democrats that have dealt with some of the same type of issues are now supporting Donald Trump, because I think we're tired of seeing this type of abuse go on with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, and the FBI, and things of that nature.
Thank you for calling in, Lupe. Don is in Sandston, Virginia, a Harris supporter. Hi, Don.
Hi.
Yes. What's on your mind tonight?
It's a real easy choice for me. I voted for Kamala Harris because I could not support a convicted felon, misogynist, racist, someone that wants to change the Constitution. Project 2025. I mean, the issues just goes on and on and on. Not to mention his character, his morals. Who would trust your daughter or wife to be left alone in the room with Donald Trump?
That's Don in Sandston, Virginia. Greta Bronner, what do you have for us?
We have another call tonight by the Associated Press in the state of Illinois. The Associated Press calling this race tonight for the vice president. 9% of the votes in. So those 19 electoral votes will go in her column. Peter?
Richmond, Virginia. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Who's your candidate of choice?
I voted for Claudia de la Cruz this election.
And who is Claudia de la Cruz?
She's a socialist. I supported her primarily because as a trans woman, I believe that neither of the candidates have my best interest at heart. And more than that, I cannot support a candidate who is directly complicit and responsible for a genocide in Gaza, Free Palestine. The United States is sending millions and millions of dollars to the Israeli government to kill women, children, and other innocent Palestinians all across Gaza.
Aaron, what do you say to your acquaintances and friends who say to you, you're wasting your vote on a third-party candidate?
I feel that, I mean, I live in a state that is predominantly going to be blue, so I don't feel that, you know, if I voted red, that would make a difference. I don't feel if I voted blue, that would make a difference. And I vote on what I believe is the correct humanitarian, harm reductive way to cast my vote.
Thank you, Aaron, for calling into C-SPAN. Evan McMorris Santoro of Notice, News of the United States, is here with us throughout the evening. What have you been hearing in our conversation now? I'm sorry I'm making you be the one who takes whatever Kirk and Greta and the callers all say, go.
I'm enjoying it. I'm really having a great time. That last call was pretty fascinating. I was on the ground in Dearborn, Michigan, the night of the Democratic primary there, when we really saw the power of this Gaza movement that the caller referred to inside the Democratic Party. It was this group of people there, they called themselves uncommitted, because what they did is they voted, in Michigan, there's an option on your ballot to vote uncommitted for your Democratic primary ballot. Like, kind of like a none of the above. It was too late in the game to put a candidate on or to run somebody else. So they voted this uncommitted line to sort of show that there was a lot of people who were upset about what at that time Joe Biden's administration, what Joe Biden was doing, their feeling about Joe Biden about this issue. And we saw folks who thought they might make an impact of maybe a few thousand votes or a few tens of thousands, more than 100,000, very successful. They sent some delegates to the DNC, and this issue has continually dogged the Democrats throughout the entire election cycle. The passion you hear from that caller speaking about this issue is something that I heard a lot in Michigan at that time, and you still hear in parts of Michigan now. We heard Democrats maybe shifting some of their focus away from areas like Dearborn, where President Biden enjoyed great support in those places in 2020 because he was pushing back against some of the comments that President Trump had made, and the so-called Muslim ban, those kinds of things, very motivating for those communities. That motivation has been turned off in a lot of ways by this issue of Israeli policy towards Israel. And I saw that on the ground. I've seen it all played out. We're not sure how that's all going to end up tonight, but it really, that passion has been something that's been a really important part of the Democratic race actually throughout. And I was just, it's just so interesting to hear how all that stuff manifests itself in that call. Another thing that was in that call was talking about transgender issues, right? This has been, another caller, previous caller mentioned that that was one of the reasons that they supported President Trump, right? Because they had heard a lot of those, those ads. It was very important. The Trump campaign and the Republicans are running a ton of advertising about this issue, about trans rights, pushing back on them. And we've had some reporting at Notice that some transgender rights groups have felt the Democrats have not really done much to push back against that. That they've kind of maybe stepped away from an issue that maybe is not doing a lot for them electorally. This is, the result of that can be voters like this who, obviously they live in a blue state, maybe not so important for what their vote might be for the end result. But if voters like that in a place like Michigan, Pennsylvania, could be a big deal.
Well, it's about 10 minutes away from a lot of more polls closing in various states, including all of the polls in Michigan at that point. Joining us again is Kirk Beto. He is editor-in-chief of the Hotline. Kirk, we talked about the Senate race over in Michigan a little bit earlier, but I want to talk about some of the House races there that are competitive, beginning with Alyssa Slotkin, who is the Democratic nominee for Senate, her seat.
In her seat, Michigan 7, Lansing area, that was the most expensive House race in the country last cycle. Now, there's a lot more expensive races in more expensive media markets right now. It's still very pricey out there, but that's kind of Democrats' most vulnerable seat right now, at least their most vulnerable open seats. They're defending 4 open competitive seats, and that is the most vulnerable out of all of them there. Tom Barrett, who ran against Alyssa Slotkin, came close in 2022, is back again. And I would say that he's probably the slight favorite in that race right now as we sit here a little bit before, about an hour before the final polls close in Michigan. It's going to be a really tough race in there for Democrats, and they acknowledge that. But if they hold on to that race, that is probably going to be a great sign for them throughout the rest of the night, because that is the one that's probably Trump might carry that seat. That's what we're anticipating right now. That's one of the predictions that we have right now. But that is going to be a tight race that could go a long way in determining control of the House.
And right next door is Michigan 8.
Yeah, Michigan 8, again, that's a little bit safer ground for Democrats. That's the Dan Kildee seat. He's retiring. That, again, a little bit more favorable for Democrats as we sit here right now. Now, there's 3 competitive seats in Michigan. Michigan 7, Michigan 8, like what we're talking about. Michigan 10, where Republican John James is in a really tough fight right now. Whoever wins 2 of the 3 of those seats is probably going to have a pretty good night right now. And if Republicans sweep and get all 3, they're probably going to keep the majority, or at least that's what strategists have been telling us here at Hotline.
Now, Kirk, you mentioned Michigan 10, which is John James. He's the Republican incumbent at this point. Is that Macomb County, the infamous Macomb County of Michigan?
Yes, it is. And John James is a name that's very familiar with voters in Michigan. He ran statewide twice. He lost twice, and then he 2 years ago he ran in the House, won that race, and that race has come online pretty late in the game here. The James campaign has been really scrambling in the last few weeks here to shore up that race. I would still think John James, because he's an incumbent, because he's got a good amount of money, good amount of name ID, is probably the slight favorite in that race still, but don't sleep on Carl Marlinga in there.
If John James wins or loses, is that a bellwether on the presidential level?
I think it would be at the presidential level if he loses. Now, if he wins, he's still the slight favorite in there. We're kind of going on the status quo here. Michigan at the presidential level is going to be very competitive. But if he were to lose there, and especially in an area where Democrats, at least at the top of the ticket, have struggled, like we alluded to, then it's going to be a pretty good sign for Democrats here, not just in Michigan, but some of those other areas that we were thinking it might be a problem spot with Harris, with black voters, with Muslim voters, with Asian American voters. She struggled a little bit with those groups. But if Democrats flip that seat, then Harris might be looking pretty good in Michigan and in other parts of the country as well.
Kirk Beto, you are editor-in-chief of the Hotline. You've been spending a lot of time with us. We're going to let you go and do a little of your own work, but we will check back in with you a little bit later. Thanks for being with us.
This is the fun part of election night. Thanks for having me.
Greta Bronner, what do you got?
Let's check in on that North Carolina governor's race. The Associated Press is calling Josh Stein the winner tonight with 24% of the vote in. Our viewers will know Mark Robinson, who was challenging him, the Republican there. His campaign was rocked by a CNN report with allegations of controversial remarks that he posted on a porn site. The News and Observer reported that campaign staff quit. He was showing up at events by himself in the closing days of this campaign. They also reported that the Democrat here, Josh Stein, raised 11 times more money than Robinson in the final fundraising quarter. Now we're expecting Josh Stein to come out shortly and deliver a victory speech.
Kristen is calling in from Olympia, Washington. Trump supporter.
Hi.
Hi, Kristen. How are you?
Good. Happy Election Day.
How was your process?
It was great. I did vote by mail, so it was really easy.
Is Washington 100% mail? I know Oregon is, but but not Washington State?
No, you can go in person too.
Okay. How was the process for you today?
It was great, and normally I vote Democrat. I always have, but this time I voted for Trump.
Why?
You know, I just felt like we need a change, and I want someone who's going to put our country first. And it just feels like we really need someone who's going to pay attention to the increasing cost of living that we've been experiencing. We have 3 kids. And, you know, the economy is really important, and also the illegal immigration issues.
Are you seeing that in Olympia, Washington?
Yeah, I mean, the cost of living here is very expensive, and it's getting harder for families.
Kristen, did you support Joe Biden in 2020?
I did. Yes, I did. I've always voted blue.
Thank you, ma'am, for calling in. Evan McMorris Santoro, News of the United States reporter.
Right.
What did you hear from that caller, Kristen?
Well, that was a very interesting call, actually, and it speaks to these two issues, right? We talk about this idea of prices. Prices have been everywhere. You talk to people that talk about prices. This has been a very difficult issue for the Democrats to get their hands around. They've spent a lot of messaging on this. They've talked a great deal about it. You know, they've pushed back against sort of Trump's planned tariffs that he's promised, that they're going to raise prices. Prices have been a huge part of this campaign. And, you know, I spoke to someone not long ago who was talking about how that actually you could see, based on the inflation that's happened all over the world in sort of the past, in the past few years after COVID, that you've seen a lot of incumbent parties really struggling because of these prices. I mean, this is a real thing. If it's in your own pocket, you really feel it, right? So you see people, you know, this is the kind of voter that Harris is really hoping they don't have a lot of, which is people who move from Biden to Trump because of things like prices. That is a storyline that is exactly what the Trump campaign said we were going to see a lot of tonight. Again, it's very early. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's the kind of thing that the Harris campaign has been actively trying to make sure it doesn't happen.
You know, I'm really old, and I remember when Washington State was competitive and had 2 Republican senators. It was basically prior to the tech industry moving there. Is that?
Well, I mean, it's quite interesting. I mean, we're talking about Florida, right? I mean, I remember that being a pretty competitive state too. These things move around.
And Democratic.
Yeah, that's right.
Democratic
That's right. They change a lot as it goes along, but that doesn't necessarily all reflect all the voters that are in that place. Like you see a big shift among the majority of the voters you don't know. North Carolina is a place that in recent years, you know, if it hadn't been for Robinson being kind of so bad a candidate in the end, that you would have not expected the Democrats to do as well. But now you have a place that has a Democratic governor, looks like replacing a Democratic governor, a big surprise, but in a state that's moved more and more red as things have gone on.
And down in Raleigh, Josh Stein is getting ready to speak. It looks like they're having quite a celebration down there. We certainly will bring that to you live when Governor Stein comes out to talk about his reelection. But that's in Raleigh, and that's live. Next call comes from Alexis in Orem, Utah. Alexis, you with us? Hi. Alexis, Orem, Utah. Please go ahead. Are you with us? Okay, let's try Ryan in Palatine, Illinois. A Kamala Harris supporter. Hi, Ryan. Ryan?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Please go ahead. What'd you call in to talk about?
Hi.
Ryan, what'd you call in to talk about?
Hello?
I apologize. I don't know if we're having a minute of trouble here with the phones again or not. Tom in Pennsylvania, a Trump supporter.
Hello?
Tom, you with us? Yeah, we're having a little bit of trouble with the phones here. They'll take care of that. I appreciate it. Let's check in.
Let's check in. My name is Tom. I'm from Pike County, Pennsylvania. Can you hear me?
Tom, we're going to have to let you go for just a second. We're going to check in with Greta Broner.
We have some news coming out of Milwaukee. This is a reporter with CBS in this city. Breaking news here that the city of Milwaukee is going to recount about 30,000 absentee ballots that had already been counted. There was an issue with one tabulator not being sealed. Out of precaution, the city will recount each ballot. A long night just got longer, is what AJ reports here, CBS reporter out of Milwaukee. And then an update here, a little after 8, the cavalry had been called in, he reports, from Baird Center. 30 to 40 city firefighters, health department, and IT workers had been sent in to help process absentee ballots. That's the latest out of Milwaukee. We'll keep an eye on that story.
In just a minute, but it is 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. Nearly the entire country, the polls are closed. Here's what's closing at 9 o'clock. Arizona, which has a Senate race and 2 competitive House races as well. Colorado with a competitive House race. Kansas, Louisiana, the rest of Michigan is closed. We've talked about that. Minnesota with a Senate race. Nebraska with 2 Senate races, which we haven't talked about yet, but we will. New Mexico also has a Senate race. New York is closing. North Dakota with a Senate and a governor's race. South Dakota, Texas is now fully closed. Wisconsin and Wyoming. Evan, that's a lot of states and a lot of news ready to come out, huh?
We're waiting for it.
What are you going to be listening for? What are you going to hear?
Well, we want to see what's going on in Arizona. That's part of one of our swing states we're looking for. And we're talking about some of those western states where, some of these House races are important, and also some of the, that Senate race in Montana, we're looking for that. This is exciting stuff to see all this stuff starting to come in. Although that Milwaukee news does indicate that maybe we may be waiting a long time for some of the presidential results, depending on sort of how close other states are. But we may have a better picture of the Senate relatively, a bit sooner than that.
And in just a minute, Josh Stein will be coming out to give his victory speech in Raleigh, North Carolina. More speeches are going to be happening. That's live from Raleigh there. We're going to check in with Greta Broner. Greta, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, Peter, let's take a look remind viewers what we talked about earlier, and that is the cost of this race. You had noted at the beginning that $16 billion total in these federal election races. This is the money from outside spending on the 2024 elections. This is from Open Secrets, and it hit a record $4.5 billion, with more than half of that spending coming from groups that did not fully disclose their source of the funding, that from the Associated Press. And then also, we showed you this earlier. Here are the top 10 billionaire families by political contributions. This is from the Americans for Tax Fairness. They put this report together in the final days of this campaign, and you can see the first 6 wealthy families all donating to Republicans, followed by the Simons family and the Bloomberg family for Democrats there. Elon Musk, $133 million, according to the Americans for Tax Fairness. Peter?
And in just a few minutes, we will be going to Josh Stein and other victory and concession speeches throughout the evening. But with the polls closing in several states, I want to ask you about a Senate race in New Mexico. President Trump stopped there on his way to Arizona and Nevada and rally in Albuquerque and mentioned Nella Domenici. Who is she?
This is a really interesting thing that the President Trump did stop in New Mexico. I have to say, I'm not completely versed in that race. I've been very focused on the 7 states we've all been talking about.
Well, I don't think any of us were, but Senator Heinrich is running for re-election, of course, and Pete Domenici's daughter is the Republican nominee. Is it competitive? Have you heard anything about that being competitive?
Well, this is one of those things where sometimes when you see Trump do things, you're not exactly sure what the result is going to be in terms of electoral things. You know, he popped up in New York a couple times, not very helpful to his presidential race. But look, they think they can make a game of it, and I think they're going to give it a shot. I don't think that Democrats have been very concerned about it, no.
Let's hear from Tom in Tafton, Pennsylvania, a Trump supporter. Tom, are you with us? No, okay.
I can hear you through the television, sir.
Yeah, we can't do it that way. Sorry, Tom. There's a delay, so we don't have any calls at this point. Okay, we're going to have to take Tom down. I apologize to everybody, and I apologize to you especially, Tom, that we're unable to do that right now. But you can always send a text message in, and we will get to some of those as we go throughout this evening. 202-748-8903 is the number for text messages. Please include your first name and your city if you would, so we can identify you that way. And you can continue this conversation both on X at C-SPAN and on Facebook, facebook.com/C-SPAN. Greta Bronner, what do you got?
Let's check in on the state of Florida and the Senate race there. Rick Scott, the Republican incumbent, seeking another term in the Senate. He is a wealthy businessman that has loaned $22 million in this cycle, according to Hotline, to his race. The Associated Press has declared him the winner tonight, 92% of the vote in. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, the former congresswoman, challenging him for this seat. Democrats were getting a little optimistic in the last month of this race, hoping that she would be able to take out Rick Scott, but that is not the case this evening. That stays with Republicans, that Senate seat. Moving on to the abortion ballot initiative in the state of Florida. There are 10 states that have ballot initiatives this election cycle, and Florida is one of them. On Amendment 4, take a look at the results right now. 91% of the votes in, 57% of the voters have voted yes on Amendment 4. It's an amendment to limit government interference with abortion. It states that no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, was fighting against this abortion ballot initiative, and it looks like the Florida voters are in favor of it. It needs 60%, though, in the state of Florida, so we're going to keep watching it to see if it can meet that threshold. Peter?
Evan McMorris Santoro, Florida. Trump, it's already been declared for President Trump. Rick Scott, it's been declared for Rick Scott, and it's voting for a pro-choice ballot amendment.
The last one is a little bit different because of the rules in Florida. You have to reach a 60% threshold for a ballot initiative to count, right? So it's a little bit like cloture. People on C-SPAN are well aware of what this is, where like something can lose while getting more votes, right? That's it. That's the case with that abortion ballot amendment that we've seen. But that Rick Scott race, there was a minute or two when there was some conversation that this might actually be a competitive race. We had a reporter from Notice who was mentioning this Scott a lot, like he was sort of declining to debate his opponent there that he just defeated tonight. This was maybe there was a chance that Democrats might have a race there. But again, this is sort of like Florida just comes up to appear to be wishful thinking for the Democrats. They just, once again, do not have a handle on sort of how to make the electoral impact there, even in a moment where you did see more voters vote for the pro-choice amendment than against it. It's just the fact is because of the rules there, it didn't pass. But they can't turn that into electoral wins in other parts, on these ballot races. Like, I mean, on these on these candidate races, obviously.
Now, before we lose you, and we're going to lose you in a few minutes too, because you have work to do as well. There are 2 Senate seats up in Nebraska, both Deb Fischer and Pete Ricketts. Why 2?
I actually don't totally know why there's 2. I'm sorry. You keep catching me out on this. I feel like
apologize.
This is like the C-SPAN Haitian near the end. No, I'm sorry. I really should be up on it more. But the Nebraska race is quite fascinating because you have a race where there's an independent candidate running against Fischer, and has gotten a lot of
Dan Osborne.
That's right. Has gotten a lot of coverage, a lot of focus. This is a former union leader. He's gotten a lot of focus from national unions. Have gone in there to do things. I'm not sure that in the end we necessarily expect this person, Dan Osborne, to win this election. However, you do have this situation where this is a different kind of candidate running in a state like that and actually putting a scare into the Republicans there. It could be a sign of the future of politics in some of these places with these rural voters, and these, as politics maybe realigns a bit, that maybe a different kind of candidate will be the ones who face these Republicans down.
And Pete Ricketts, the other senator in Nebraska, is having a special election, because he filled in for Ben Sass.
That's right.
All of that
to go to Florida to run a college there. Yes.
Right. The Arizona polls have closed, so we'll be looking forward to getting some results from there as well. We're waiting on several other states to be called. Evan, I just pulled up from cspan.org/results. You go to your very own magic wall that you can get on your in your hand, and I pulled up Georgia. And just looking at this, you can see the map there of Georgia. It's got blue dots and red dots showing. And then the big dot, of course, is Atlanta in Fulton County. And you go there, and Kamala Harris has 72% of the vote currently. Donald Trump has 26% of the vote. And that's with 68% of the vote counted. Does that tell you anything?
I mean, that's pretty good sign for... tell me those numbers again, those first 2.
72% and 26%.
Yeah, I mean, these are the numbers that...
It sounds like very positive for the Harris campaign.
Yeah, Harris needed those numbers to be like that, but we'll see when the more numbers come in. But this is what the kind of thing that they've been looking to get in counties like this. They need to run those Democratic votes up and get those margins up really, really big. So then if they do any kind of work in the suburbs that they've been trying to do, that those things can actually end up being for them a gain, right? Because at this point, Fulton County, that's a place where they really need to, that's where they're going to get the sort of, that big basket that's going to help them make Georgia competitive.
And that, again, that's with 68% of the vote counted. I will tell you that in 2020, Joe Biden did get 72% of the vote, and Donald Trump got 26% of the vote.
I'll tell you the early signs that I am seeing from other reporters and people that I've been talking to, and talking to throughout the night is that, this 50-50 election that we were projected going into tonight with these polls, people wondered how close, if these close polls were actually right. And it's looking more and more like that is what we're looking at, is a very, very close election that could take a long time to find out what the actual result is.
Let's check back in with Greta Bronner. Hi, Greta.
We want to look at some of these swing states and see where the results are at this point, starting with the state of Michigan. Now, President Biden won Michigan in 2020 by 150,000 votes. Here's where it stands right now, with the vice president in the lead at 10% of the vote in. Moving on to the state of Wisconsin. This is another battleground state, the state of Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes at stake. And you can see 0% of the votes in. You can see how the Associated Press is populating that at this point. Now, in 2016, the former president won the Badger state by 23,000 votes. In 2020, Biden won by 21,000 votes. This is going to be a close contest. We'll continue to watch Wisconsin. Let's go to Pennsylvania. And this is the biggest haul tonight of the swing states. 19 electoral votes at stake. And you can see the vice president with a big lead at this point. We told you how Pennsylvania counts its votes early on may lead to a blue mirage. We could see this race tighten as the evening goes on. Let's also check in on North Carolina. Let's see how this battleground state is doing at this point. 40% of the vote in, 16 electoral votes, and the former president is in the lead right now. Finally, let's go to the peach state of Georgia. And again, this is a battleground state. Biden's victory there in 2020 marked the first time a Democrat won since Bill Clinton in 1992. Biden won by 12,000 votes. Here's where the race stands with 68% of the vote in. All of these results can be found on our website at cspan.org/results.
And we'll be back with Greta with more results shortly. But right now, the current governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, is introducing Josh Stein, who just got elected governor of North Carolina.
Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We also hold next to our hearts the people of Western North Carolina. We're going to work hard to make sure they recover. We got a long night ahead of us. I know everybody's watching closely for the rest of the results because we know our country must make the right choice. And we have important elections across the state. But we need to take a moment right now. We need to take a moment for our beautiful home state of North Carolina because we have done something important here with this victory in the governor's race. You know, every election gives us choices, and there's never been a wider gulf between the choices in this race. And so tonight, with this victory, I ask you, North Carolina, did we choose progress? Did we choose experience? Did we choose reproductive freedom for women? Did we choose support for our public schools? Yes, we did. We chose all of that and more. I've known our next governor for a long time, and North Carolina is better because he's been an amazing public servant and attorney general. And now it's time for his new job. And Kristen and I can tell you, it's a job that truly matters in the lives of everyday North Carolinians. Serving as your governor has been the honor of my lifetime. And by working together, we've expanded Medicaid. We've recruited a record number of good-paying jobs. We've passed clean energy legislation to get us to carbon zero future, appointed the most diverse cabinet and staff in the history of our state. And we've stopped a lot of bad legislation. And so much more. I know what it takes to do this job. And I knew that to keep our progress going forward, we needed to write the right person to take over when it was time for me to leave. We needed a person with integrity and grit. We needed a person who will work with anyone to get the job done. We needed a person who will never back down from doing the right thing. We need a person who will blaze his own trails, and we got that tonight. He is ready to do this job and to do it right. He has the steady hand, the clear-eyed vision, and the servant's heart to make North Carolina stronger than ever. So, North Carolinians, I present to you the next governor of North Carolina, Josh Stein. North Carolina! Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It is a treat to be with you. Thank you, Governor Cooper, for that very generous introduction. And thank you, North Carolina. Tonight, the people of North Carolina resoundingly embraced a vision that's optimistic, forward-looking, and welcoming. A vision that's about creating opportunity for every North Carolinian. We chose hope over hate, competence over chaos, decency over division. That's who we are as North Carolinians, and I am so honored that you have elected me to be your next governor. Thank you. Thank you. I've got an easy question, and I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask y'all anyway. Who here, like me, loves North Carolina? North Carolina is home. Home to remarkable natural beauty. Home to small businesses and Fortune 500 companies. Home to some of the finest universities and one of the best community college systems in the nation. And we are home to the best people. As we celebrate tonight, our hearts are with the folks of Western North Carolina who are still struggling. Hurricane Helene swept in devastation, destruction, and darkness. But the goodness of North Carolinians shone through. Neighbors helping neighbors, people dropping everything to lend a hand. And by the way, none of those folks cared whether the person they were helping was a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. They just showed up because that's who we are as North Carolinians. And we will show up for the people of Western North Carolina to help them rebuild safer and stronger than ever before. I ran for governor because I love our home state, and I believe in the promise of North Carolina, that where you come from should never limit how far you can go. That our kids and grandkids should enjoy a better and brighter future than we've had. That every North Carolinian should have a fair shot at success, starting a small business or getting a good paying job everywhere in this state, including small town North Carolina. To deliver on that promise, we must invest in our people and their futures so that together we build a safer, stronger North Carolina where the economy continues to grow and works for everyone. Where our public schools are excellent and our teachers are well paid. And where our neighborhoods are safe and women can make their own decisions about their own bodies. Just like rebuilding Western North Carolina, these issues, good jobs, strong public schools, safe neighborhoods, and personal freedoms are not partisan issues. They are North Carolina issues.
We have big challenges ahead, but we have even bigger dreams to realize. We can cut taxes for workers so you keep more of your own money. We can pay teachers what they deserve and open up doors of opportunities for our children. We can expand career and technical education because you shouldn't have to go to college to provide for your own family. To build this brighter future, we must put aside our differences and work together. We must reject the politics of division, fear, and hate that keep us from finding common ground. We will go further when we go together, not as Democrats, not as Republicans, not as independents, but as North Carolinians. And I know we can do this because I know who we are. I have met so many inspiring people across this state. Debbie and Cornelius, who tragically lost her son to fentanyl and is fighting to protect other families from that same fate. Lauren, a teacher in Greenville, who digs into her own pocket to buy school supplies for her students to give them a better chance. I want to thank everyone I have met along the way for sharing your stories with me. And to the thousands and thousands of people from every corner of this state who helped to build this campaign, I am forever grateful for your support. Thank you for believing in the promise of North Carolina. And if I didn't earn your vote in this election, I hope to earn your trust by working hard for you as your governor. I pledge to listen and work across party lines to do what's right for North Carolina because no person or party has a monopoly on good ideas. To all of the smart and smart aleck young people on my campaign, thank you for the long days and late nights. Thank you for the hard and high quality work. And thank you for the laughter along the way. They, by the way, are incredible. I also want to thank Governor Cooper. Let's give that man the hand that he deserves. Roy Cooper has led our state with a steady hand through an unprecedented global pandemic, a 1,000-year storm in the West, and 2 500-year floods in the East. He expanded Medicaid, strengthened our business climate, and fought for our public schools. Roy, I could not be more grateful for your service and your friendship, and do not even think about changing your cell phone number on me. My parents, Adam and Jane, raised my brother Eric and my sister Gerda to try to do what is right just like they did. It's truly one of the best gifts that parents can give to their children. I want to thank them, and I hate that my dad got a bug yesterday working early voting, and so they're watching it here on TV. Let's all say thank you, Adam and Jane. To my wife, Anna. Otherwise known as a rock star. Thank you for being the glue that keeps our family together, for keeping me focused on the things that really matter, and for being you. She is going to be a remarkable First Lady.
And you've been listening to Josh Stein, the Democratic governor-elect in North Carolina. You can see the rest of this on our website at cspan.org. Right now, we're going to go to Wisconsin. The Republican nominee for Senate, Eric Hovde, is speaking. We want to hear what he has to say.
Till tomorrow or late tonight, when many of you have left and went home and went to bed, I'll float in and out of here. I have to go back to the war room, see what's happening. You know, it's too early to tell, but there's some good signs that we've seen in Georgia, hopefully in Pennsylvania soon. It all comes down to turnout. I've been saying the last couple weeks and certainly the last few days. If our side gets out and brings their friends and family, we'll have a great night. So, folks, have some fun, party, have a great time, and let's hope for a victory tonight. And thank you, everyone, from the bottom of me and Sharon's heart. We couldn't do it. We could not do it without you. We could not do it without you. Oh, and real quickly, I could not walk off this stage without recognizing a few other people that mean so much to me. First, my family. Come on up. My two daughters and my granddaughters and son-in-law. Come on. You know, this is why I've gone through this. And it's not just for them, it's all our children and grandchildren. Aren't these too cute? I know I'm biased. So, you know, my older daughter, Carlin, my son-in-law, Tommy, and my younger daughter, Britta, so grateful for them. And then I would also like to recognize I've had the greatest team.
And that's Republican Senate nominee Eric Hovde speaking to supporters up in Wisconsin. Not a victory, not a concession, just a wait-and-see speech. Let's check in with Greta Bronner here on C-SPAN.
We have more wins to go through from the Associated Press in this presidential contest, beginning with the state of North Dakota. 6% of the vote in the Associated Press says that Donald Trump is the winner tonight in the state of North Dakota. Moving on to South Dakota, and the Associated Press is also saying that the former president wins tonight. 2% of the vote in, 3 electoral college votes at stake, and he is declared the winner. In Louisiana, the Associated Press is also calling this race for the former president. Moving on to Wyoming. Now, there is no data in yet in Wyoming, but the Associated Press feels comfortable enough with their VoteCast survey and other data that they have received to say that the former president has won. Also as a factor is past elections. And in 2020, President Trump won Wyoming by more than 40 points. Moving on to the state of Ohio there, and the former president also gets a win in the state of Ohio. This is a big haul, 17 electoral votes in the state of Ohio, and he gets a check next to his name there. And in the state of Texas, moving on to that state as well, you can see that the Associated Press has called the former president the winner there. Also a red state, 60% of the vote in Texas. We'll move on to the state of New York. And this one tonight has been called for the vice president with 33% of the vote in. So she gets those 28 electoral college votes in her column. Remember, we're keeping track of the electoral college tally on the left of your screen. And that is where you can see the total as these states are called by the Associated Press throughout the evening. Peter?
Well, about 20 states have been called so far by the Associated Press. You can see this at cspan.org/results. And there is a national map there. And when they go bright red or bright blue, that means that they have been called by the Associated Press. Those states in light blue and in light red have not been called. The results are too inconclusive at this point to call this, but you can do this yourself. And you can click on each individual state. And if you click on any of those states, all the counties come up. And you can see how many votes have already been cast and counted in that county. So you can track the election yourself in the palm of your hand. 202 is the area code for all of our numbers, 748-8920. If you are supporting Kamala Harris for president, 202-748-8921. If you're supporting Donald Trump for president, all others, you can call in at this number, 202-748-8922, and please send a text message as well, 202-748-8903. If you do send a text message talking about the issues, the election, the candidates, what the process was like for you, please include your city and your first name if you would. Let's return to your voices, and let's hear from Mike in Fort Lauderdale. Mike?
Hello, can you hear me?
We're listening. Who'd you vote for?
All right. I voted for Randall Terry, Constitution Party.
And why did you vote for Mr. Terry?
Basically, I disapproved of the major party candidates this time around, and I also wanted to mention my primary reason for calling is to support something called approval voting. You mentioned ranked choice voting, but I wanted to support approval voting as an alternative method. It's easier to implement, easier to cast your ballots, and it has, I guess, a better, I guess, in terms of just overall fairness of the.
Hey, Mike, how does approval voting work?
Oh, okay, great question. So basically, rather than ranking the candidates, you just check which candidates you approve of. So it's either a yes or no for each of the candidates. But basically, it allows you to express approval for more than one candidate, but you also have to think, is this a candidate I'm willing to compromise for? And it would tend, particularly in a presidential election, to allow for compromise candidates to have more of an advantage. And I think that would be good for the country.
Is that used anywhere?
Well, I know in this election, the only I think there's a mayor's race in St. Louis that used it. If not this election, a recent election.
Okay.
And I know, and as far as there's actually an approval voting party in Colorado, where that's kind of where it's centered. Unfortunately, I couldn't vote for that party on my ballot, but.
Hey, Mike, you said you voted for Randall Terry of the Constitution Party. Is this the same Randall Terry who's been very active in anti-abortion activities?
Yeah, but I mainly voted for him to support the party rather than him specifically.
Thank you, sir, for calling in from Fort Lauderdale. Greta Bronner is here at C-SPAN.
Let's go through the battleground states in the presidential contest, beginning with Georgia, and show our viewers where it stands right now. This is a competitive state, as we've been talking about all night long. In 2019, the black voting population in Georgia reached a record high of 2.5 million eligible voters, making up a third of the state's total electorate. That's from Pew Research. So the black vote in Georgia is one to watch tonight. Moving on to the state of North Carolina. As we told you, Barack Obama, the last Democrat to win that state in 2008. This is where it stands right now. 59% of the vote in. The former president leads 51% to nearly 48% for the vice president. And then going on to Pennsylvania. And for one of these candidates to reach 270, Pennsylvania is pivotal. 28% of the vote in. This is where it stands right now. Michigan, the other battleground state here of the one of the 7 that we've been talking about all night long. 13% of the vote in, 15 electoral votes are at stake. Obama won it in 2012 by 9 points. In 2020, Biden won by 150,000 votes. In 2016, the former president won Michigan by 11,000 votes. Let's go on to the state of Virginia. This is one where Republicans were thinking they may have a chance here. 13 electoral votes are at stake. Republicans talking about it being a swing state. But as we've said, President Biden won this in 2020, 57% of the vote in. This is where it stands right now with the former president, just a slight lead. This could be a red mirage. Moving on to Wisconsin, the polls just closed at 9 p.m. Eastern time in Wisconsin. 19% of the vote is in, and you just heard from Eric Hovde, who's running in that Wisconsin race, that it's going to be a long night, and so that'll be the same for the presidential contest as well. Those are the swing states, the closely watched races in the presidential contest that we'll keep an eye on all night. Why? Because it was so tight in 2020. Look at the winning margins in each of the 7 battleground states in 2020. President Biden won Arizona by just over 10,000 votes, and in Georgia, over 11,000 votes. In Michigan, as we said, over 150,000 votes, and in Nevada, he won by almost 34,000 votes. Now take a look at the other 3 remaining swing states from the 2020 margins. This is from ABC News. North Carolina went to the former president in 2020 by over 74,000 votes. Biden won Pennsylvania. As we told you, that's pivotal to getting to 270, and he won it by over 81,000 votes. And then in the state of Wisconsin, Biden won the Badger State by over 20,000 votes in 2020. Those were the winning margins from 4 years ago, and that is why these are battleground states. We do have another race called in the Senate contest in Maryland. Angela Alsobrooks, who was running for Ben Cardin's seat against the very popular Governor Larry Hogan. She is declared the winner tonight in the blue state of Maryland, 52% of the vote in. Peter?
And Greta and I will be here until 3 a.m. At that point, we will continue to give you results and speeches and call-ins. And then the Washington Journal tomorrow morning is a 5-hour program. So 17 hours in total of live election night coverage. Want to hear from you throughout the evening. We'll put the numbers up on the screen. Cassandra is in Phoenix, a Kamala Harris supporter. Hi, Cassandra.
Hi. I just wanted to call in. I appreciate your guys' coverage. That's impartial. And it's been nice hearing everyone's views. And I think the biggest thing too, which is what I was feeling, is that we're really not being heard. I think it's why a lot of people are coming in with ranked choice voting, kind of celebrating that, or maybe other options to try and just get our voices heard. I also think it's why people are feeling so strongly on things. I've always been a blue voter, honestly. I registered Republican because that's how I grew up. And my first election, I voted for Obama. So I decided to stick with it. And I've lived in Republican areas and Democrat areas, and it's really just been, and I get why people maybe are switching parties, because nothing seems to really have changed. I think maybe getting a lot of dark money out of our elections, which both candidates are kind of have used, especially in this election, it will certainly help us get our voices heard. But my main issue, honestly, is for abortion. I'm really hoping, too, that even if for some reason Harris doesn't win in Arizona, that we have Prop 139 kind of enshrine that right in our Constitution.
Yeah, that was on your ballot this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm really hoping that passes, because either way, our states do have rights, no matter who ends up being the majority party in power. So I'm hoping that comes through.
Hey, Cassandra, being a battleground state, how would you describe that experience?
It's kind of interesting, just because I have a lot of family who's also voting Republican, and people that I know and work with. I think you can always tell. It's almost kind of like the same version that voter in Alaska had, where you try and keep it, to yourself mostly, unless you're really going out there and campaigning. Try and keep the peace, but I'm really hoping too that if for some reason there's some discrepancy with voting, that everyone stays safe, because it can get pretty heated. So I definitely went in 2 weeks beforehand and cast my vote, because I don't want to be at the voting offices today. So. And
what do you do out in Phoenix?
I actually sell insurance and service insurance policies.
Cassandra, thanks for spending a few minutes with us. We appreciate your watching. Up next is Harold. Harold is in Chatham, New York, a Trump supporter. Hi, Harold.
Hi. How you doing?
Why are you calling?
Yeah, I today right there I fight for Donald Trump. He says he's going to lower the gas price, and he's going to trying to cut the gas price down. I trust Donald Trump before I don't trust Joe Biden. Kamala Harris, they wanted to raise it up jack high. That's why my wife and I get $125 with the food stamp cover. Joe Biden is low. It's going up, and Kamala Harris is going up.
All right. Harold, really appreciate your calling in and watching C-SPAN tonight. Thank you. Greta Bronner, what do you have?
I've heard from some of our viewers tonight that reproductive rights is what drove them to the polls. As we've said, 10 states had abortion rights measures on the ballots this election cycle, and there have been races called, or ballot initiatives called, by the Associated Press in 3 states. Let's begin with that Florida one. We talked about it earlier. Remember, it needed to hit that 60% threshold. The Associated Press is saying it will not get there. And so Florida voters have opposed this right to abortion ballot initiative this time around. And as we said, the governor, Ron DeSantis, was really fighting against this ballot initiative in the state of Florida. Then moving on to Maryland and their abortion ballot initiative there, you can see that it passed 74 to 26%. The Associated Press saying that Maryland voters have agreed with their right to abortion in that state. That also likely helped Angela Alsobrooks in that Senate race become the victor over Larry Hogan. Moving on to New York, where there was also a abortion ballot initiative for folks to check off, and 72% of voters with 32% in checked yes. So the Associated Press is saying that is now approved by voters in the state of New York. A total of 10 states had abortion ballot initiatives on the ballot for voters, and it was a lot of, there they are on your screen, a lot of money spent on in favor and in opposition to these ballot initiatives. Take a look at this from the Associated Press, put together by Axios, and you can see the money raised by abortion rights and anti-abortion groups. Total $161 million spent for these ballot initiatives, while only $24 million spent against. Peter?
And we're going to continue to take your calls and get results. And when the speeches come in, the concessions and the victories, we'll go to those live as well. Ryan is in Chicago. Ryan, good evening to you. Who'd you vote for?
Good evening. How you doing?
How are you?
I'm doing good. First of all, I just want to say the fact that you guys are staying up till 3 a.m. doing this is awesome. You're doing the Lord's work. Thank you, because this is a tough day. And also, I wanted to say right off the top, everyone that's calling in that's a third-party candidate, I think it's so amazing that even though their vote is in some ways symbolic, because unfortunately we only have two major parties, they know so much about the issues and they are so on top of the things that they care about that if we actually had a viable third party and we had people that were that invested in the candidates, this country would be much better off because they really pay attention to what's going on. And I respect that. But
you know, I just want to agree. I want to agree with you on that. We had Aaron in Richmond, and then we had our friend from Fort Lauderdale call in, and both knew exactly how they felt about issues and very specifically why.
Yes, yeah. And it's great because you know they're standing up for principle, even though they know that statistically they're probably not going to win. I love that. I voted for Kamala. And I'm calling in because I wanted to ask you guys if you want to talk about it, or callers can talk about it. Basically, talking about like the future of conversation in this country, because as I see it, when you look at someone like Donald Trump, and this is, no disrespect to the people that voted for him, but he's observably stupid. And he says he constantly lies. And he constantly talks in a way where it sounds like he does not know what he's talking about. It sounds like somebody who did not read a book and then they're asked to like summarize the book. And when you talk to people that vote for him, some people have very like basic talking points that they don't focus on any of his policies or any of the things that he says. They basically just say, well, I'm not happy with what is happening right now in this country. And so he's a good businessman and he's going to make things better. And then when you bring up things like, well, he was caught in this lie, or he's a convicted felon, or yada, yada, you don't really get anywhere in a conversation. So I'm just wondering what you guys think, like, as we move forward, if verifiable facts do not matter, how do we vote as a people, and how do we reach people that are kind of confused on certain issues if people can just brush aside something that is verifiably true and that has just facts behind it, but yet people can kind of brush it off like, well, I didn't see it, so I don't pay attention to it. Like I
Ryan,
like
we appreciate it. Thanks for that thought provoker. What do you do in Chicago?
I'm a writer.
What kind of writer?
Creative writing, and I also do some more like technical writing, but my main thing is creative writing. So that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for calling in. Kevin is next. Kevin is calling in from Pennsylvania on our Support President Trump line. Macungie, did I get it right?
Yeah, somewhat right. How you doing?
How are you? Where's Macungie?
It's like on the outskirts of Allentown.
Okay. So, what was the process like for you? What's the election been like for you, Kevin, in a swing state?
It was a bit turbulent, because Pennsylvania, despite being the state, where the country was founded, seems like not too many people put thought into it. So, once November comes around, it seems like everybody starts caring.
Was it tense?
A little bit, but I try and stay calm through it.
Yeah.
And I was mostly calm because I knew I was certain that I was voting for Trump because of two main issues: the cost of items and abortion.
Okay, Kevin, President Trump was there 20 plus times. Did you ever go to a rally?
I have not because I was busy with work and stuff. But I wish I did because his rallies, they just seem fun. They seem down to earth. Like he just seems like a guy that gets people. So if I did have the option, though, I would have voted for Mega Man because Dr. Wiley must be stopped.
That's Kevin in Pennsylvania. Rob is next, Dayton, Ohio. A Kamala Harris supporter. Hi, Rob.
How you doing, Peter?
How are you?
Oh, I'm just great.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, so the reason I voted for Kamala Harris is because for me as an Ohioan, I really care about my own rights as an American. And since 2020, what has been talked about is Donald Trump wanting to take away the First Amendment right for news organizations to sue them if he doesn't like the stories that are told about him. He wants to take away the Americans' right to free speech when it comes to burning the American flag to protest. So to me, it was all about my rights as an American and about other Americans' rights to protest, for the news to do their job, and stuff like that.
Now, Rob, did you vote straight Democratic? There's been some talk that Mike Turner, the congressman from Dayton, might be in a close race.
No, actually, I'm actually a registered Republican. I voted for Mike Turner.
Really? And you voted for Kamala Harris and Mike Turner?
Yep. I also voted for Sherrod Brown.
And Sherrod Brown. Okay. You're all over the board. What do you do there in Dayton?
Oh, I'm an electrician. I'm an industrial and commercial electrician.
Who did you support 4 years ago?
4 years ago, I supported Joseph Biden, and 4 years before that, I supported Donald Trump.
Rob, thanks for calling in and sharing a little bit with us. Let's check back in with Greta Bronner.
Let's go through some races that have been called in the Senate. These are safe Republican incumbent seats, beginning with Mississippi. Roger Wicker will get a 4th term in the U.S. Senate. Moving on to Nebraska. This is a race between Dan Osborne, or this is the Pete Ricketts race. This is the special election in Nebraska. Pete Ricketts was appointed to this seat for Ben Sasse when he left. The governor appointed Pete Ricketts to fill out the remainder of his seat, and now a special election to do the rest of the Sasse term. And Pete Ricketts is able to do that tonight. Moving on to North Dakota, the race has been called there. Kevin Cramer wants a 2nd term in the Senate, and he gets it tonight. The Associated Press declares him the winner. And then in Tennessee, in this Senate race, again, this is safe Republican incumbent seat, Senator Marsha Blackburn. She gets a 2nd term in the Senate. And then in the state of Wyoming, the Associated Press doesn't have any data in, but they feel comfortable putting the check mark next to Republican Senator John Barrasso. John Barrasso, for our C-SPAN junkies, they know that he is challenging other Republican senators to become the leader of the party in the Senate, because Mitch McConnell is planning to step down from that leadership post when the new Congress reconvenes in January. Let's go to Missouri. The presidential race has been called there. 26% of the vote in. Here's the percentages right now, and Donald Trump gets a check mark tonight. Peter?
202 is the area code, 748-8920 if you support Kamala Harris, 202-748-8921 if you support Donald Trump.
No, we were.
All others, 202-748-8922. And text messages. If you want to send in a text, we'll be looking at those as well, 202-748-8903. Please include your first name and your city if you would. Let's hear from Michael in Sparta, New Jersey. Michael, good evening to you. Who is your candidate of choice?
Good evening, and thank you for C-SPAN. I actually abstained from voting at the top of the ticket just because I wasn't happy with either of the choices, and it doesn't really matter in New Jersey. But the main reason I wanted to call in was to share what's going on in the betting markets, since that's legal now. Since the start of the polls closing, it looks like Trump has shot up like by a huge amount. He's up now 71 to 29. And that's based out of like a 50
Michael, what does that mean?
They both started at 50 cents.
Michael, does that mean that President Trump is favored in the betting markets?
Yeah, so since like about 3 hours ago, he just started shooting up, and it's usually reflective of some kind of inside information, just judging from prior elections. So I'm just curious as to like what's going on there.
And I apologize, I'm making you the expert because you're the one who brought it up. What is a betting market? How broad is this? Is this 3 people or is this 3 million people? And who can place these bets? Michael?
I'm sorry, I think the phone is breaking up.
Okay, I apologize, Michael. We're going to have to let you go at this point because don't want to hold you up. We're going to go back to Greta Bronner in just a minute. I do want to point out at cspan.org/results, if you go there, you get the magic wall in your palm. It is a map, and it is a map, an electoral map of the United States. You see the whole thing there. Go onto this, and you can click on every individual state, and as the Associated Press calls the states, they will turn it either bright blue or bright red. The ones that are light blue and light red, that means they're in, that candidate is leading, but they have not been called as far as results go. You can also look at the individual House and counties and Senate races, and it's in real time. It's a terrific tool, and recommend you go there, cspan.org/results. And let's see if Melissa in Jonesboro, Arkansas can hear us. Melissa, can you hear us?
Well, just barely. Of all the nights
Okay.
to have your phone go crazy on you. I'm just glad that Donald Trump's going to win this election and we can finally get out of this poverty-stricken attitude that we all have and maybe have a steak and baked potato. How you doing tonight?
That's Melissa in Jonesboro, Arkansas, having a steak and baked potato. We appreciate your calling in. It is 10 p.m. here on the East Coast. Polls are closing. Iowa, Montana, Nevada, and Utah. Utah has a Senate and governor's race. Nevada has a Senate race. Montana, Senate race and governor. And we want to check in with Greta Bronner.
Let's look at those competitive states in this presidential contest, beginning again with Georgia. This is one of those battleground states that folks have been watching this whole election. Just with 80% of the vote in, want to show you where things stand now. 16 electoral votes are at stake in the Peach State. A reminder, President Biden won by 12,000 votes in 2020. Moving on to North Carolina in the Tar Heel State, 16 electoral votes here in the Tar Heel State. The last 3 elections have been decided by less than 4 points and just 1 point in 2020. Going to Pennsylvania, again, this is 19 electoral votes, the biggest electoral vote prize. The winner might only need 2 other battleground states if they snag Pennsylvania. 2016, Trump won 48 to 47%. 44,000 votes, over 44,000 votes, became the first GOP presidential candidate to win since 1988. 2020, Biden won 50 to 48.8%, or over 80,000 votes. Moving on to the next battleground state of Michigan. This is 15 electoral votes. Democrats have won every contest but one. That was in 2016, since 1992. That year, the former president won 11,000 votes, or 0.2 points. By comparison, President Obama won in 2012 by 9 points. This is where it stands right now, 15 electoral votes in Michigan, and you can see where the vote is, 16% in. Another state that is interesting tonight is Virginia, and we want to give you another update on the state of Virginia, where it is right now with 61% of the vote in. And you can see that the former president is leading by less than 2 percentage points, 13 electoral votes. President Biden won this in 2020. So we'll keep an eye on Virginia tonight to see if it stays blue or not. Let's go on to Wisconsin. The polls closed there an hour ago. 35% of the vote in, and you can see how neck and neck it is right now between these two, the former president and the vice president there. Just, this will take a long time in Wisconsin. 35% of the vote in if it stays this tight. Moving on to Iowa. Ann Seltzer, she put out a poll over the weekend that many of you probably heard about. It showed a competitive race in the red state of Iowa. The queen of outlier polls, as she is known, had the vice president up by 3 points among likely voters, driven by the strength of independent women who told Seltzer in this poll that they were backing the vice president by a 28-point margin. Look at where it stands right now, how close this is in the state of Iowa with 29% of the vote in. Peter?
Greta Bronner, thank you. We'll check in a little bit later. Evan McMorris-Santoro of Notice, News of the United States, reporter there, has rejoined us after a little break. We appreciate your coming back, Evan.
Thank you.
Now, I was trying to keep up with Greta. Again, I'm on our magic wall, cspan.org/results. You get this map. It's phenomenal. When she talked about Virginia, I went to Virginia. Fairfax County, the big county for the Democrats, 72% of the vote has already been counted from there. But then you go down to Virginia Beach, only 30% has been counted. That tends to be a Republican area. Went to Polk County, Iowa, Des Moines. And most of the vote, 97% of the vote is in, or 87% of the vote is already in Polk County. And Kamala Harris is leading 55-43. Most of the other counties have not been counted at this point.
Well, that's a Democratic vote in Iowa if, you know,
Polk County is.
Polk is where it is.
Yeah.
And so if that number's not very high, it does not bode well for that Seltzer poll down the line. The Virginia stuff, again, we're waiting for results to come in. But if those numbers hold, even if they stay where they are and Harris wins it, but by this narrow number that it's where it's set up now, that would be a huge change. That would be a very different election than we were expecting even just a couple of days ago. You know, the Seltzer poll really is an interesting question. It is an outlier. It was a very different poll than anybody else really had. There was some conversation around that, but we'll see. But those Polk numbers, again, a lot more numbers to come in. We're waiting, you know, until the AP has called it. That's what we're waiting for. But those numbers do not look great for that poll.
Let's check back in with Greta.
Let's look at the presidential contest in the state of Montana. This is a red state. The president has won this by double-digit margins. The former president has in previous cycles. 2% of the vote in, and the president is being called tonight the winner in Montana. Going on to the state of Utah, the Associated Press has also called this race in Utah 6 electoral votes at stake. And you can see that the president is declared the winner by the Associated Press there. The Associated Press has also called this Utah Senate race. Mitt Romney decided not to run for re-election. John Curtis, the Republican there, will take over for Mitt Romney. This stays a Republican seat in the U.S. Senate.
Greta, thank you. We will be back to check in with you later. Evan McMorris-Santoro, you were able to take a break for about 45 minutes and do your work for Notice. What did you write about?
Well, I was checking in with our team. That is, we have reporters all over the country right now. We have a big newsroom here in D.C. that has been covering everything and staying very, very focused. And I was just checking in to see how things are looking. And the Notice newsroom, you know, it looks like the path that Harris was looking for tonight may be narrowing so far. Right. It's still very early, but you know, one of my colleagues who's been running some of these numbers, looking at some of this stuff, was saying that, you know, you're looking at Harris really needs those suburban numbers in the Midwest to really come in. And so you look at that Iowa thing, you know, that was the Seltzer was supposed to be some kind of indication of that. We don't know. We don't have votes yet in, but there is a feeling, I think, that some of this stuff is narrowing a bit for Harris at this point in the night. That like it's looking like a better night for Trump than for Harris so far. But things are very, very close, you know. And so this is what we're checking. I was just checking in to see sort of what was the kind of you know, the vibe, if you will, how people are feeling about this. And that feeling right now is that this path is narrowing for Harris at the moment.
Greta Bronner has more results.
The Associated Press is calling the state of Delaware in the Senate race there for Lisa Blunt Rochester, the congresswoman.